Middle time. Okay, it's already automatically in.
I can't hear.
Okay, can we get the ASL interpreter videos to be authorized, please?
What is it? Oh.
It's right here. That.
One.
The other.
I don't.
Yeah, I came up.
Did you see her?
I don't. I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
Good evening. I hope everyone can hear me. Welcome to the School District Board of Education meeting for August 11th, 2020. I am going to call the roll to make sure that we have a quorum of our board present. I will start with Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, present.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, present.
Howell. Mr. Howell's on mute. Mr. Howell.
No, he's not muted.
Warren Howell, present.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, present.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Smith Tucker, present.
Okay, Keely Powell is also present. So we have 6 board members present and 1 vacancy. So this meeting is called to order. We will begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the first agenda item for this evening is reorganization of the Christina Board of Education.
Fred Pulaski, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Dr. Daniel Sheldon, our superintendent, as executive secretary of the Board of Education.
This is Claire O'Neill. I second the motion.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we approve Dr. Dan Shelton as the executive secretary of the Board of Education. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and call the vote on this item. Mr. Pulaski,
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell,
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak,
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker,
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill,
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. That is 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. The motion carries. Next up, we have the officer election process.
Make a motion to authorize the executive secretary to initiate the procedure for officer election under Delaware Code 1045.
This is Claire O'Neill. Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we authorize the executive secretary to initiate the procedure for officer election under Delaware Code 1045. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the roll. Mr. Howell,
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak,
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker,
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill,
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, 1 vacancy. That motion carries.
Thank you. At this point, I call for nominations for president.
Fred Pulaski, I nominate Dr. Keely Powell for president.
Claire O'Neill, I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve Keely Powell as president for the Christina Board of Education. Is there any discussion? All right.
Keely, actually, Dan's supposed to be doing that right now, so, but that's okay.
Are there any further nominations? All right, at this time, a roll call vote. Dr. Keely Powell,
Yes. Is Keely Powell voting yes?
Mr. Fred Pulaski,
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Dr. O'Neill,
Claire O'Neill, yes.
going through my list here. Ms. Smith,
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. Moriak,
Monica Moriak, yes.
did I get everybody? 'Cause I only have part of the screen
No.
open.
Howell.
Warren Howell.
Mr. Howell,
Warren Howell, yes.
they have me on speaker view, so I don't have my full screen in front of me. We gotta figure out how to get that back. I don't like this at all. At this point, it is declared that Dr. Keely Powell is declared president of the Christina Board of Education by a vote of 5 yes, 1 vacancy,
6 yes.
six yes, 1 vacancy.
Yep.
I now turn the floor over to our newly elected president, Dr. Keely Powell, for the remainder of our reorganization.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. All right. I now call for nominations for vice president.
I'd
Fred
like
Pula- Fred Pulaski, I nominate Claire O'Neill for vice president.
Monica Moriak, I second that.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that we approve Dr. Claire O'Neill as vice president. Is there any discussion?
You have to ask if there's any other nominations too.
I'm sorry.
We're volunteers.
Are there any other nominations or volunteers for vice president? Okay, I don't hear any. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and call for the vote for Dr. Neal for vice president. Mr. Pulaski,
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell,
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak,
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker,
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Great. Keely Powell also votes yes. So it passes with 6 yes, 0 no's, no abstentions, and 1 vacancy.
Congratulations to both of you.
Yay,
Congratulations.
dynamic duo.
Okay, so now we're going to get into approval of the agenda for this evening.
Madam President, before you go there, could you make an announcement based on the number of people that are joining that will also be live streaming tonight?
Oh my goodness, yes.
In the event they get knocked off?
Yeah, so there are a lot of people on this evening. I want you all to know that we are also live streaming this meeting on YouTube. So in the event that you are not able to access this meeting, you can access it via YouTube. I know the information has been publicized, I believe, on the district website as well as on our social media channels. So if for some reason someone who's watching this evening is not able to get in, or you know someone who cannot get in, they can join this meeting via YouTube, and some of you already are. So back to approval of the agenda.
It's Fred Pulaski. I'd like to make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda with the removal of item number 20, which is titled, I gotta look,
Calendar
under modification. So approve items 1 through 19 and drop item number 20.
Well, we're K20.
K20, yeah, action item 20.
K20, okay. Do I hear a second?
This is Claire O'Neill. I second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda with the removal of item K20. Any other changes? Any discussion of that? Okay. With that said, hearing none, I'll go ahead and call the roll on the agenda approval. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Ms. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay, Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. This agenda is approved, that modification. Now we get into approval of minutes. First item is approval of executive session minutes from July 14th, 2020.
So moved, Fred Pulaski.
Second, Claire O'Neill.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the executive session meeting minutes from July 14th, 2020. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will go ahead and call the roll for this one. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay, Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no's, no abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next item, approval of regular session minutes from July 14th, 2020.
Fred Pulaski, so moved.
Claire O'Neill, second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the regular session meeting minutes from July 14th, 2020. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Great, and Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next is approval of executive session minutes from August 5th, 2020.
Fred Pulaski, so moved.
Claire O'Neill, seconded.
Great, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the executive session meeting minutes from August 5th, 2020. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. And now we have approval of regular session meeting minutes from August 5th, 2020.
Fred Pulaski, so moved.
Claire O'Neill, second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the regular session meeting minutes from August 5th, 2020. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead with the vote. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay, Keely Powell also votes yes. 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, one vacancy. Next up is public comments. And I want to thank everyone who has submitted their public comment for this evening. Before we go ahead and get started with it, I'm just going to read a few guidelines. The board will now recognize members of the public who have indicated they wish to speak. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or 20 minutes per issue. I will keep track of the time and make sure that I give you an audible signal when your time is up. This evening, for some issues, we have more than 7 people who are speaking on one issue. As a result, the time for some issues will be reduced to keep all comments per issue within the 20-minute limit. And in some cases, some groups have chosen a spokesperson and have yielded their time. I want to take this opportunity to remind you that this meeting is being recorded. When you submitted your request to address the board, you acknowledged your statements would be recorded and that the use of the recording is at the discretion of the district without recourse. And just a few reminders about public comment before we get started. Personal attacks on individuals will not be tolerated. Indecent language will not be tolerated. A person may address the board no more than twice during a single meeting. I do have a list of people who have submitted for public comment this evening. So we will be looking for you on Zoom and looking to unmute you to give you the floor. Please make sure that the name that you use to sign up for public comment is the same name that I'm seeing on Zoom, so it's easiest for us to find you. So we'll call people at one by one. I will keep time and I'll just try to keep some virtual eye contact with you so we can make sure that we are on the same page.
Ms. Noonan is on.
Okay, first up, we have Julie Noonan. And I believe she has, looks like she has 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Julie Noonan. While I am a teacher in the district, I'm speaking for myself tonight. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Tonight, you will take action on a resolution to hold virtual board meetings. There's a list of things which you are being asked to consider when making this decision, including that the end of the COVID-19 pandemic is not known. The state of emergency may be terminated before all concerns with COVID-19 have been overcome. Board meetings can result in crowded conditions that do not allow adequate social distancing. It is not known if there are meeting locations within the district that provide adequate ventilation airflow to prevent transmittal of the coronavirus. The health and safety of members of the CSD board and other personnel needed to hold an in-person meeting is of utmost importance. The health and safety of members of the public. Pardon?
Go ahead.
And school district employees who attend the board meetings is of utmost importance. These are very real concerns, as are those of the Christina families and staff. I am asking that if it is deemed acceptable for students to be physically attending school, that the board also meet in person. It seems sensible to keep a limited provision for board members who are unable to be physically present to join the in-person meetings online. But if the buildings are safe enough for students to be there for 7 hours, they are safe enough for you to be there for 2. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you this evening.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dee White Carl talking about school reopening.
And they are unmuted.
And you are unmuted. The floor is yours. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to speak briefly to the board about the consideration for reopening. I know that through the different metrics that we have, that it's recommended that we go with a hybrid, but I'm sure most of you have been following what's been happening in some of the states and some of the misadventures of the schools, let's say, as far as starting off quickly with hybrid or in-person part of the way. So I'm hoping that the board will really consider the possibility of 6 weeks remote to begin the school opening. And then what we can do is we can really learn during that period what other schools have encountered, how we can better prepare for the in-person, and really have a more well-rounded approach than just starting off with hybrid and trying to adjust as we go. So I just want to share that with the board and those in attendance.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Fanon Woodside talking about school reopening.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm a parent in the Christina School District, and I have a young child who would not be required to wear a mask in their school. And similar to what somebody just said, considering how the reopenings in the other states have gone, I would hope that there would be some consideration of us returning virtually until we can get a better hold on what effects that's going to have and the potential for community spread that we would have if we returned even in a hybrid model. And that we would also consider the potential long-term health effects that are being studied and are currently being found for our children and our teachers and our staff. Yeah, and that's basically all I had to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jericho Ponce or Jericho Ponce.
Jericho is not on.
Jericho is not on. Okay, I will move on. Our next person talking about safety reopening protocols is Elizabeth Mays. Ms. Mays has 9 minutes as there were 2 people who yielded time.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I would like to again advocate against face-to-face instruction, especially for our youngest students and those with the most significant needs. They should not be the test subjects for our district as we discuss how to roll out face-to-face discussion or instruction as we move further. Last week at the Delaware PTA Town Hall, one of the panelists said that what we need at this time is confidence. I would like to add what the youngest students and the students with the most needs at this time also need is consistency. I do not believe that the teachers, support staff, bus drivers, bus aides, secretaries have the confidence at this time that we can return to our school building safely on September 8th. This is not to blame our administration, but to note, like the previous speaker said, that the conditions are constantly changing. What we know about COVID-19, how it's transmitted, and how it affects the body changes on almost a daily basis. As a parent, I don't have the confidence that my child will not contract this at school or transmit it to my husband or myself, rendering us incapable of caring for our young children. As an educator, I have the same concerns about bringing home a disease that has been known to kill individuals in every age group. Our students that have the most significant needs are met by wonderfully trained staff in this district. I am honored to work with them. These staff provide consistent support to our families, no matter the situation. At the PTA Town Hall last week, Dr. Shelton alluded to concerns regarding staffing and the ability to fill teacher absences prior to COVID-19. While I think this is extremely important to note district-wide, I would be remiss not to convey my deep concern that I have for staff shortages for our students with the most significant needs. Many of these classes rely on paraeducators for essential functioning. You may not be aware when a paraeducator is absent or perhaps quarantined, a substitute is not ordered. In the Delaware Autism Program, our teachers and paras are specially trained on emergency techniques, applied behavior analysis, and alternative modes of communication. Leaving one of those roles unfilled or finding a substitute, perhaps if a teacher is absent and we can find one, does not ensure consistency in education for our neediest students. I would imagine that there is not an abundance of substitutes qualified to step in at the Delaware School for the Deaf or the REACH programs located in our district as well. The staff that serve these students cannot just be swapped out. These students deserve the consistency and the high quality education that specially trained staff provide them. As a mother of a young child, I advocate for this group as well. How can we expect them to feel safe and confident in attending a school if their teacher is quarantined? Teachers of our youngest students build a special rapport with their class. Having to deal with the sickness they don't fully understand or the death of a person in their school is not something we should subject them to as we talk about who we are rolling out first for face-to-face instruction. I believe that supporting a fully remote format for the first marking period provides the consistency for our students while ensuring that staff are not required to quickly plan to pivot to face-to-face instruction. This gives staff, administration, and families ample time to have frank conversations about concerns that we all have, so that when the conditions for safety are met, we can all return face to face with confidence. And in the interim, we will be there for our students consistently in a remote setting. Thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Kyle Lynch.
And he's unmuted.
And he's unmuted, and you have some donated time. So you have up to 12 minutes to talk about starting the school year remotely.
Thank you. First, Dr. Powell, congratulations on being voted president of the Christina Board of Education. And I want to thank all of the board members as well as Dr. Shelton for listening to me tonight. My name is Kyle Lynch. I've worked in the Christina School District for 11 years. I attended school in the Christina School District. I have several family members that have and do still work in the Christina School District. I live in the district and I believe in the district. There's been a great deal of debate on how to return to schools this upcoming school year, be it remote or in a hybrid situation. When Governor Carney announced that it was possible for schools to open in a hybrid fashion if guidelines were followed, we had a choice to make. That choice was not made. And the only viable option at this point is to open remotely until the district has a clear plan that can ensure the safety of all staff and students. In 13 days, on August 24th, staff began professional development and preparations for the new school year. Before they walk into the buildings, there should be testing, physical modifications to the buildings, and air handler upgrades in buildings that with aging and inadequate systems, including our schools with no windows. A plan for how to interact and prevent the spread must be decided on. Even if this could be accomplished in the next 13 days, we have to take into account that in 6 days, on August 17th, our city school staff will begin their professional development. There are some that will be upset that I focused on staff before students. There are currently 25 teaching positions listed on the CSD website and 46 jobs total. There has been a shortage of substitute teachers, and in the cases of paraprofessionals, it is rare that there are staff to cover if there are absences. In programs like DAP and REACH, paraprofessionals receive special training, and missing staff could result in staff and students being in physical danger. If we can't protect the staff, we cannot ensure that there will be enough staff to ensure the education and safety of the students. Even more simply, if we cannot protect the staff, we can't protect the students. And if we can't protect the students, we can't protect their families and the community. If we can't protect the people, the only choice is to open the school remotely this school year. I believe that the safest course of action would be to return to school remotely through the end of 2020 and work on facilities, planning, and acquiring adequate amounts of PPE to ensure that going back on January 2nd, 2021 would be possible. While this may seem extreme, the situation is extreme. Newsweek reported just today that the Cherokee County School District in North Georgia has directed 826 students and 42 teachers to quarantine as a result of exposure to COVID-19. They've been in session for 6 days. 6 days. That district was unprepared, had a poor plan with poor implementation, and is paying a price. I hope that we can learn from the Cherokee County School District and that our staff, students, and their families aren't forced to pay with their health or possibly lives to learn lessons that those who came before us are sharing with the world now. We must start remote and return in person only when it is safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Kate Wisniewski, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, Katie Wisniewski, talking about school reopening plans.
It's okay, Wisniewski.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
You have up to 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Katie Wisniewski, and I've been a teacher in the district for 6 years. As the district plans for the upcoming school year, I am concerned that there seems to be a desire for teachers to deliver instruction from classrooms, even if students are doing remote learning. I don't think that the benefits outweigh the risks for this, especially since many teachers share classrooms and instructional spaces. Teachers have worked at home long before the pandemic began, writing IEPs, grading papers, entering report cards, and lesson planning in the evenings and on weekends. It is unfortunate that, despite teachers putting in all of these extra hours on their own time, the district would feel that the only way to ensure that teachers are working during remote learning would be to have them in the school building. We don't need to be micromanaged to do our work. If administrators felt that some people weren't meeting work requirements, then they should address those people individually. Too often, we are all quote unquote punished for issues that could have been addressed individually. Research shows group punishments don't work, and we've moved away from using them with students. I would hope that educators can be shown the same respect. Thank you for your time and your service on the school board.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Lisa Lemon talking about reopening of school. We have a lot of people talking about this topic. Ms. Lemon, you have donated time and you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here again this week to share my voice. My name is Lisa Lemon, and I'm a proud elementary teacher for the district for 20 years now. As we face the greatest challenge to ever hit public education and to our school district, a global pandemic, this is not the time to not allow our voices to be heard. This is the time for you to hear me, to hear us. This is the time for you to acknowledge me, to acknowledge us. As I can only speak for myself, it has been disheartening to not get responses back from some of you when emailing my concerns. It is disheartening to see some members not have video on. It is disheartening that board interviews could last over an hour, but public comment for the safety during a global pandemic is limited to 20 minutes. The priorities seem off during these unprecedented times because it is your teachers and support staff that make our CSD pride. We are the ones that help clothe our students, feed them, love them. We spend our money on books, supplies, flexible seating, stickers, snacks, vocabulary accounts, Kahoot accounts, Quizlet accounts, Brain Pop accounts, and let's not forget Teachers Pay Teachers accounts. We do this to ensure our students are happy in school, engaged, and most importantly, enjoy learning in a safe, comforting environment. So when the decisions need to be made about safety and well-being of us and our students, we are the ones you should be looking to and listening to. We are the highly educated and dedicated professionals in child development and academic pedagogy. This delayed decision has been unfair and harmful to many of us. I have spoken to dozens of teachers that represent CSD that are anxiety-ridden, myself included. We are struggling with physical symptoms such as irritability, stress dreams, headaches, high blood pressure, all stemming from this uncertainty. We are 6 months into a pandemic of a virus with over 160,000 US deaths and 97,000 new COVID-19 child positivities in the past 2 weeks. At what point do we acknowledge that we have a new normal to face and that it is better to save it for us and our students than be sorry? At what point do you say enough of prolonging our decisions? We are going to make the safe choice. I feel as if I am in a constant state of battle, battling against the lack of national leadership, battling for school funding, battling against the anti-maskers, battling against the lack of a universal plan for school reopenings, and the unfortunate battle with the district just to hear our plan. In closing, I leave you with this. We are dealing with a global crisis. All of humanity is facing the challenges of living during a pandemic. It is time to stop politicizing the virus and realize that it is the virus which is currently in charge. Our decisions for school reopenings should be based on science and facts. Right now, I don't see science proving it is safe. And I don't see teachers advocating that teaching with masks, shields, and maintaining social distance is in the best interest of our children. Please remember, if teacher safety cannot be guaranteed, then student safety cannot be guaranteed. And ultimately, community safety cannot be guaranteed. I implore you to open face-to-face only when it is safe.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Michelle Barisco.
She is unmuted.
She's unmuted. You're ready to go. The floor is yours, up to 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle. I come to you actually as a parent of 2 8-year-olds in the district and also as a pediatric nurse. I do hear all of your concerns, and I've talked to all my fellow parents as well, and what we have really considered. I have personally lived through the fear that you all are going through. I do practice in a clinical setting, so I do go to the hospital for work 5 times every 2 weeks. And I worked through the part of the pandemic where we had no idea how to properly protect ourselves, where we didn't know what to deal with, where we didn't know who had COVID-19, what kind of PPE were we supposed to be wearing, and we really didn't have any tests as well. So the testing was based upon who qualified as getting a test, and they had to have respiratory symptoms. And then we learned that those weren't all the only symptoms of COVID-19. So I do really hear your fears, and I do commend you all for advocating for yourselves and for your fellow teachers. I do also, however, feel that there is hopefully a very safe way to open the schools. And I think that I will listen to the debriefing that John Carney put ahead today. I don't know if anybody else listened to it, but he did discuss how they were planning on beefing up the community testing as schools began to reopen. And so he was talking about putting testing sites around every school so that people could even have access to walk up to them. You can actually order tests to be delivered to your home, and they are free. I think that you are correct. I think that you do need to feel comfortable and confident, but I also think that that comfortable and confidence comes with some education. And I think that there is definitely room for us to be able to educate you all on how to properly protect yourselves against this virus and how to prevent yourselves from gaining disease pathology and things like that. I think that we are very lucky that Delaware is a state that offers testing and it's so readily available. In other countries and other parts of the United States, testing is very hard to come by, and it's very ineffective. So I think that we are a head up on other people, which is great. Also, talking to parents in my mom group and in my work group as well, it seems as though not all of them want to send their students back to school, which will be convenient that we have offered a remote option, but it'd also be convenient to not flood the schools with children all at once. And I don't think it's like a completely unfair idea to say that maybe we should be gradually reopening schools in a sense that start one particular elementary school first. That way we can logistically take care of and allocate our resources in an effort to focus all of our attention into one problem, because it is a very complex problem, and I am very glad that I'm not the human being that has to decide how to solve the problem.
You can finish up your thought, but time is up.
Okay. However, I do commend you all. I'm sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. Next up, I have Elizabeth Cotty.
Elizabeth Cotty and Belinda Frias are neither are on.
Okay, Ian Glidewell.
And I'm assuming ENG is Ian Glidewell?
You are correct, sir. Thank you. I kind of regret not coming prepared with something. I am Ian Glidewell. I am the parent of a special needs student in the district. I mostly agree with Ms. Lemon's remarks. I think she kind of got right to the point, and probably with the same heat that I would have wanted to come with when I spoke to you all. I would gladly delay my son's development for a bit of peace, knowing that he will be safe returning to school. I do not currently think that it's a fantastic idea to reopen the schools right away or even go into a hybrid situation. We should continue with remote learning if possible. And my son is a special needs student, and I understand more than many other parents that in-person education is it's more important than remote learning when it comes down to it. But right now it's not safe enough. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. Next up, we have Tyra Van Pelt.
So I can't find Tyra, nor can I find Emmaus Waltz. I found a Yolanda's iPhone, which may be Yolanda Robinson. I'm not sure.
Yolanda Robinson.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. I'm a parent of a child too with special needs, and my concern is I know, for example, my son, when he's not going to wear a mask. I mean, even though I know they're not required to, but he's not going to wear a mask. I have that concern because, you know, he has autism, he has sensory needs, and I can't even get him to wear a mask when we go to the grocery store because I have to go out to get food. My other question is, even with the Zooms that we were doing over the summer, I mean, I appreciate the teachers and they were doing an amazing job, but he really didn't get a lot out of it because he's more hands-on. And I do understand with the COVID and everything that the safety of the teachers and the students, I wouldn't want to put anybody at risk, but I was just wondering how would children with IEPs and the DAD program, how would the hybrid learning affect them? And would they have any face-to-face instruction when it's safe? And how would you be able to properly social distance children that, I mean, would they be required to wear a mask if you're in kindergarten? I mean, I want my son to wear a mask, but I know that he's not going to wear one. And I mean, that's basically all I have to say. I was just like basically concerned of like, cause he's already behind and I just didn't want him to get further behind than what he already is.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. We will get some updates during the superintendent's report in a few minutes on the agenda.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, that does conclude our public comment for this evening. Thank you to everyone who took the time to speak to us. Next up, we have the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee report.
This is Fred Pulaski. I make a motion to approve the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee report.
I need a second.
Monica Moriak, I second that.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we approve the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee report. Is there any discussion on that matter? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and call for a vote. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Ms. Tucker. Mrs. Smith Tucker.
You have to unmute Ms. Tucker.
Smith Tucker abstain.
Okay. And Keely Powell votes yes. So we have 5 yes, 0 no, 1 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. This motion carries. Next up, we have the superintendent's report.
Thank you. And as Mr. Goff places the presentation up on the screen this evening, I appreciate all the comments of our staff this evening and also appreciate the number of our parents who came to speak tonight and members of the community. We share concerns, and tonight we hope to help you all to understand our place in our process. We have had 3 working groups that have broken into multiple subgroups. As we talked briefly in our last meeting, it was our anticipation that the governor was going to set a specific guideline for how schools were to open. Governor and the Secretary of Education have provided some guidance, but those guidance were, rather than having 3 very specific areas, really was only 2 areas. So our committee then has now been working to identify specifically what are the places where it will be appropriate and what are the factors that we need to consider. So first I'd like to bring up, I believe, Moffitt is on, and she is going to go over our survey, which was conducted.
Who's going over the survey?
Oh, Ms. Mobley, are you going to do the survey?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to see if Hope can go over this part for us, since she was nice enough to compile all the data.
Absolutely, and she was on. She just tested her camera a second ago. I just got to find her. There are a lot of people. So just so you know, while I'm trying to find, there she is. While I'm trying to find her, which I just did unmute her, there are, or the last time I was given an update, we have about 480 people today on our Zoom here. And we also have another 300 participating via live stream. So I believe this might be our largest attendance that we have had.
Thank you, Dr. Shelton. Can I proceed with the survey?
Please.
Okay, so the survey that we administered on the very specific different scenarios of return that the governor had outlined before he announced we could do that specific lane. Those closed last week. So first I wanted to go over actually what our survey response was. Over 4,000 parents filled out the survey. We had 4,724 parents complete the survey. Because they also told us how many students they had in the Christina School District, we know that just under 7,000 students are represented in those parent voices, or about half of our student enrollment. For our staff survey, 1,459 staff members, and this includes all areas of employment, filled out that survey. Students also responded to our request for survey completion, 857 there. And then community members, which includes residents of the Christina School District. It includes childcare providers, political representatives, community organizations, etc. We had 526 there. So this slide and the next 6 slides all use the same Likert scale and responses. And we asked these questions to each of the 4 survey groups: parents, students, staff, and community members. And for the parents and community members, we had both English and Spanish versions of the survey available. So the Likert scale we used ranges from very uncomfortable all the way to very comfortable. You can see the yellow shades represent varying levels of uncomfortable, and the blue shades represent varying levels of comfort. So what we looked at first were the 3 possible lanes that the governor had outlined. First, the one that is completely off the table now, full-time, 5 days a week in-person teaching, working, or learning model. And you can see the ranges across the 4 different stakeholder groups. But in all, for all groups, the level of uncomfortable exceeds 50%. So the next 2 slides will cover the remaining 2 that are on the table. First, the hybrid teaching, working, or learning model that reduces occupancy through a combination of in-person and remote learning. Here, we again have the same Likert scale ranging from very uncomfortable to very comfortable. And again, we have an increase in comfort levels, but the level of uncomfortable still remains above the 50% threshold. Last of all, we have full-time remote teaching, working, or learning model that includes regularly scheduled classes and meetings. Here, we have over 50% comfort, but we have varying ranges of discomfort with this model from parents, students, staff, and community. Because the hybrid model is the least defined in the minds of the public, among staff members, among students, because it's something that we've not really approached before, we laid out 4 different hybrid scenarios that we thought were possible because we wanted to see what were the varying levels of comfort or discomfort with the options on the table. So first of all, we proposed a hybrid model where students would have 2 consecutive days in the building and 3 days of structured remote learning. This would allow 2 cohorts in the building, like all of our hybrid models, but would allow reduced class sizes and the ability to social distance. In this case, students are the most comfortable with hybrid learning across the different models, but even their levels of discomfort approach 50%. We also wanted to consider the impact of different hybrid models on the ability of parents to seek childcare, the ability to address the logistics of attending. So the next two models are alternating on-off schedules. This one is alternating days. That would be just like the curriculum schedules that our secondary schools use, A days, B days. There is a greater level of discomfort with this one related to the 2 days on, 3 days off. And in the comments, parents, students, staff explained their reasoning here was that by switching back and forth without having rest time in between, they saw this as a less safe model. So for alternating weeks of in-person and structured remote learning, here we're in the alternating pattern, but our reasoning was that potentially this would allow for more stable childcare identification and procurement. Here, still, because of the possible difficulties that this brings about in scheduling, out of the three we've covered, the most popular, the one that has the most expressed levels of comfort is the first 2 days on, 3 days off. And last of all, prioritization of in-person learning for pre-K3 and students in special education. This meant to be a model that potentially targets the needs of students who benefit most from face-to-face learning and from the services, the related services that schools provide. So here, we still are in a situation where each of the stakeholder groups expresses some level of discomfort exceeding the 50% threshold. We also wanted to make sure that we were correctly identifying potential device and internet access issues for our parents. And although we're not summarizing it here, we also use this survey as an opportunity for parents to express a need for technology and request a contact from the district. And we'll be following up on that. Here we can see that we have some device and internet access issues for both staff and students. And that's something that then in our working groups, we have moved to react to this information in terms of addressing the issues that our teachers and paras might need, our specialists, and our students might need as well. More students express a need for devices than for internet, but we still have 4% of our students indicating that no children, or of parents indicating that no children in their household have internet that supports multiple devices and video. And among staff, we actually also saw 6%, or actually 5.8% of staff express difficulty with accessing stable internet in their homes. Here we've broken down the information about, this is from the parent survey, but this is information they shared about their students in Christina School District. So they can see 32% of parent respondents had students who were in special education. 3% of respondents had students who were English learners. 8% had students who were gifted and talented. 1% had students enrolled in our REACH program. 4% had students enrolled in the Delaware Autism Program. And 59% of respondents had none of the above. These don't add up fully to 100% because this was a checkbox option. Some of these, more than one of these might apply. And we can tell that for some groups, we have overrepresentation of the portion of our school district, and others we have underrepresentation. So we include this information as reference so that you can know that there are potential areas where we need to pursue more information and also help with interpreting the data.
Thank you very much. So next up, we're going to go through our school reopening groups. Again, they have been working very, very hard to ensure that we have a solid plan in place. We felt it was very important that our plan be fully developed, that we don't rush into anything. Again, we anticipated at the beginning, we were building plans around the governor's directives. Once the governor gave us flexibility, then we were also building what are the metrics that we're going to use in order to determine what phases we're in. So Dr. Akins is going to begin with the academics and equity. I'm working now to find her, to unmute her. There she is. Dr. Akins.
Got it. Thank you. So, Dr. Shelton, the Academics and Equity Committee has worked diligently over the summer to align ourselves with the latest guidance to create recommendations on behalf of academics and equity for our schools for a virtual or a hybrid return. So as previously reported, we created subcommittees that focused on important work that had to happen in 3 categories. The first one we called before learning, which was really going to involve some of that rapid identification of academic, social, emotional, and basic needs, designing professional learning and planning for communication and intervention. During learning, which was our second subcommittee, we were talking about prioritizing curriculum, creating sample schedules, and ensuring ample time for outreach and intervention. And then our third group after learning is all about identifying academic, social, emotional, and community outreach and supports for students, for families and staff as they navigate the virtual learning space. So with the release of additional guidance, we have now moved our work into what we call phase 2. If you could go to the next slide. And here we have created additional subcommittees to address questions and concerns that are raised from district surveys, our observations and experiences during this time. We've launched reopening planning committees with building and program leaders to operationalize these recommendations from the BARDA committee. And we've created and continuing to create a 2-way relationship between the 2 committees as building leaders translate the recommendations for the staff on their campus. Now, this includes, but is not really limited to, a learning management system, having a system and structure in place for that, a document management system, tech tools to make the virtual learning space more engaging, how to deploy supports to those who need them, and really thinking about alternative routes and programming for reaching those families and students that find it difficult to gauge in virtual learning. So that's where we are with our committees now, and that work continues with meetings each week and just the cyclical nature of taking information back and forth. These plans are rapidly coming to life as we plan for both a virtual and a hybrid return, and we thank everyone for their hard work and commitment to the group. I'll hand it off to the next committee.
So under Operations and Services, Ms. Moffitt will return to discuss that committee's work to date.
I'm back. Thank you for the chance to share what we've been doing in our Operations and Services reopening group over the months of June, July, and now here at the beginning of August. We have 2 major themes to share tonight. The first one is a focus on increasing equity and access in the areas of operations and services. So there's 2 that I want to highlight tonight. In technology, we are recommending and beginning our work on building on Christina's 1-to-1 plan and rolling out that plan to all the grades. So the work has been in progress for a couple of years now, and we are just building on that foundation and ramping up to meet the needs of students in a situation where we go remote or some of our students are remote in a hybrid option. So we have worked with the special programs to make sure that we are procuring technology peripherals and devices that meet the unique technology needs of the students and staff in their programs. We're investing in cameras that allow remote access to classroom teaching. And we're recommending and working on designing a central help desk for dedicated live technology support, something that came up in the first survey that was administered. We saw across all stakeholder groups they expressed an interest in this help desk. In the area of nutrition, focusing on increasing equity and access, starting our work to expand remote meal access by looking into providing bus stop delivery for our CEP schools. Those CEP schools are community eligibility provision, which means all students in those schools are eligible for free meals. And that would be in addition to the curbside pickup model that we utilized in the spring and through the summer. Next slide. Our second theme really builds upon the presentation that my co-lead Ladonis Hernandez shared with you in last month's update. We are looking at operations, and we realized in our June work that operations really is about trade-offs, constraints, and bottlenecks. So some of the core constraints that we have identified in our July fact-finding and simulation work are in the areas of transportation and facilities. Now, in both transportation and facilities, we have we have ventilation challenges. In transportation, the ventilation in buses and vans is a trade-off with temperature control. Our ventilation options are all dependent on temperate weather. So any weather events or incidents negate our ventilation options, which would be venting hatches to allow for air flow through, and cracking windows and sort of our back window options. For our students with IEPs that mandate temperature control or a range of temperature, we then cannot use the ventilation options of air free throw. But we know from the research that AC use on buses that doesn't also incorporate open windows doesn't allow, can exacerbate the risk. In the area of facilities, can we go back one slide? We investigated the constraints of our ventilation system using the guidelines from ASHRAE, which is the industry standard setter, and also the guidelines that CDC and EPA point to. They recommend following the ASHRAE guidelines. Their guidelines are to, if you have HVAC systems, which we do, to, instead of open windows in the buildings, to open their increased airflow through those systems. But then that's also dependent on high filtration. So the recommendation from ASHRAE, which again is recommended by the EPA and CDC, is to install MERV 13 plus filters. Now, our systems are not capable of that. So in the decision tree before you, which comes from a Harvard Public Health research, but is in complete alignment with ASHRAE, the other option then, if ventilation, air filtration at the MERV 13 level is not possible, is to provide HEPA filter units in every classroom. However, there are supply chain issues with that, and also a high associated cost. So in the areas of ventilation and also in the areas of cleaning, we are facing constraints in meeting federal and state recommendations.
Next up, Dean Ivory will be giving us the update on the health and wellness committees. We're both hitting each other.
I think we're good this time, Dr. Shelton. Good evening, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Shelton, and members of the community. My name is Dean Ivory. I'm the Senior Director of Teaching and Learning in the Christina School District and co-chair of the Health and Wellness Committee, Reopening Committee. My partner in this work is Mrs. Dana Crumlish, Supervisor of Student Services. Members of our committee include representation from our high schools, our middle schools, elementary and special programs, our school nurses, our district lead nurse, Karen Kleinschmidt. Other members include paras, behavioral support staff, teachers, counselors, members of child nutrition, transportation, facilities, parents, and secretaries. We have worked diligently since our first meeting on June 3rd. The team has grown in number now up to 29 active members. And I would like to thank all of the members of the committee who have dedicated countless hours to ensure the well-being of our students and staff in a potential return. In our work, we have utilized the guidance as set forth by the Delaware Department of Education, the Governor's Office, and the Delaware Department of Health, along with the Center for Disease Control, to direct our work and our decision-making. We've also accepted the expectation of Superintendent Dr. Shelton that we will not bring anyone back to our buildings unless all necessary PPE and protocols are in place. Dr. Shelton has made it very clear that the safety of our faculties and our students and our families is our #1 priority, and we take that very seriously. As stated last month, our committee has focused on 3 overarching considerations or pillars. Our first pillar is to ensure the safety and well-being of our staff and students as we ultimately plan for some type of in-person return to instruction. The second pillar focuses on the social and emotional health of students and staff once they return, specifically focusing on utilizing restorative practices as a way to strengthen relationships and our school communities. The third pillar is built around educating our stakeholders on how to stay safe during the pandemic. Our first slide that you see here tonight is just a recap of the information presented to you at our last meeting on dated July 14th. Next slide, please. Tonight, I'm going to give an update on pillars 1 and 3. In regards to the first pillar, the committee has worked tirelessly to consider the necessary personal protective equipment and safety protocols necessary to safely open schools for staff and students. We have collaborated with George Wicks and his custodial and maintenance teams to align our cleaning and sanitizing protocols, especially with high-touch areas. We've also worked closely with our school nurses and our special program representatives who work with our most medically fragile students to ensure their safety and the safety of the staff that they teach and care for each and every day for those students. Since our last update, a subcommittee was formed to specifically evaluate and plan for the unique needs of our special populations. This subcommittee, led by Patty Knapp, is working closely with Delaware Public Health to specifically address the Center for Disease Control's guidelines for early childhood and special populations. Through our collaboration with DPH, the group is receiving medical guidance on how to address concerns for the students and staff in those settings where the CDC guidelines are more difficult and challenging to implement. This guidance will help the subcommittee identify the additional levels of PPE, staff training, and the most appropriate instructional settings for our vulnerable populations. Currently, in regards to PPE, the district has over 20,000 masks, 110,000 pairs of gloves, 1,900 face shields, and over 7,000 gowns. We have worked closely with Jim Boustert and George Wicks from facilities to ensure additional PPE has been ordered, because we know what we have as a start, including additional hand sanitizing stations, sanitizing wipes, and ensuring antibacterial soap in all of our sinks and restrooms. Specifically, each teacher will receive a PPE survival kit for their classroom that will include a washable CSD face covering, a face shield, a reserve supply of paper masks for themselves or their students as students break them or they become lost, dirty, or damaged, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, and gloves. Signage will also be posted throughout the building, reminding staff and ultimately students when they return to wear a mask, stay socially distant, and practice good hygiene by washing their hands. Signage will also be posted to direct student flow and student movement patterns when students ultimately return to help with social distancing. Training has been created for all staff, and this speaks to Pillar 3. This training has been developed by Patty Knapp and nurses Terry Wallace and Karen Kleinschmidt, and was vetted yesterday by our Health and Wellness Committee. The training is based on facts and the science of how the virus is transmitted, how to mitigate the spread, when and how to use PPE, how to do the daily self-health screening assessment, cleaning and disinfecting, what to do when students show symptoms, and responding to positive cases. This will all be managed, these protocols and the training will all be managed by the site-based COVID / crisis response team. This team also manages the various crisis response actions such as fire drills, intruder drills, school lockdown drills, and other tabletop exercises. But per the Delaware reopening guidance, COVID response will be an additional focus for this team. And this team will meet weekly. The COVID crisis response team will have a diverse representation and will ensure that all staff have been trained, PPE is available, safety protocols are in place and being adhered to, classrooms are arranged to meet social distancing, common areas have been restricted, cleaning and disinfecting protocols are being implemented with fidelity, and that they're being monitored. And there's a framework for staff and families to communicate health and safety concerns. Finally, school teams will utilize a tool that we've developed, a COVID readiness assessment tool. This tool was developed by Downs Elementary Principal Ann Park and Christiana High School Assistant Principal Catherine Herring to allow school leaders and COVID crisis response teams to determine exactly where they are in preparation for staff and or student return. School leadership teams can utilize this tool to audit their readiness for a staff and student return. This tool also allows the school to identify readiness in educating students and families in COVID safety and a safe return to school when we are so ready for a gradual return. I am proud of the work of our committee and the products and protocols that we've been able to create. We are also working closely on an additional protocol that would allow all CSD employees to be COVID tested prior to returning to their buildings. This statewide testing model would allow testing to continue each week that we are in session for up to 25% of the school staff. The state of Delaware is still finalizing the specifics on this testing model, and the district will work collaboratively with the state representatives and the Christina Education Association to ensure fidelity to these testing protocols, and that more information will be shared on this topic as it becomes available. Much of this work is very fluid, and these things are ever evolving, and testing, statewide testing is one of those that has been evolving right up until the 11th hour here. Dr. Shelton has continually stated that we will not bring staff and students back until all of our buildings have the necessary PPE and protocols in place to ensure the safety and well-being of our employees and students. The timeline at the bottom of the slide outlines that the buildings and classrooms will be ready for a potential safe return for staff beginning September 8th, 2020. I say this because we cannot bring students back until we can first bring our staff, our teachers, and our support staff back safely. At that point, the district can then prioritize how and when students can begin to transition back to schools in a gradual hybrid model. This is just an overview of our plan. The full plan will be outlined in the Christina School District reopening plan. Dr. Shelton, this concludes my update.
Thank you. So just a couple of points to highlight from our last couple of presentations. The first is that from the beginning, we have encouraged and asked people that had concerns or ideas to please participate. We appreciate the great numbers of people we had that have, one, participated in our surveys, but two, and more importantly, the number of employees, parents, staff who participated in these working groups. These working groups were they were working. And this is summer, and they were doing a fantastic job, and we truly appreciate all of that work. And it is really good work. We have been meeting multiple times a week in some cases with CEA to make sure that everybody's on the same page with the understanding that this is all about safety of our staff, but safety of our students, and also making sure that we are providing the best possible education we can for our students under the circumstances of the moment. And I say that because we know that throughout the pandemic, the situations seem to be continually changing. We appreciate last week, 6 days ago, that the Board of Education approved a calendar modification, which gave us an additional week of professional development for our teachers. That is going to allow us to be prepared for this new way of learning that we are going to be faced with as we open schools in September the 8th. We know that while students may not be in classrooms, students will absolutely need to be learning to the best of their ability. And that's why it's critically important that we have that extra professional development time, and we will take advantage of that. No matter where we are in our options, starting remotely, whether we move into hybrid, what grade levels, no matter where we are in that process, I want to ensure everyone that we will have a remote option available for families who choose that. That has been a directive of the governor, that even if we do move from a fully remote into a hybrid model, that we would always offer a remote option. And there are plans in place for that. We, as Dean just mentioned, we know that we're going to have staff return prior to students. So we have been working, and today there was a meeting with some outside partners to try to prepare potential additional childcare sites for staff. Normally, this would be for school-age staff, those that would normally be in school and potentially are in, whether they are in a fully remote or in a hybrid model. We will have teachers who will be working, so we're looking at the potential of places that would be non-traditional, potentially using our school buildings so that our school-age children would be able to be supervised, but also have access to the technology that they need to do their own schoolwork. So that is something we are looking at for our staff. At this point, DSEA has asked that districts look at a 6-week remote learning plan to make certain that all of our staff have the training, make sure that all of the protocols are in place. And it is our intent to follow that ask of DSEA and open our schools remotely in the Christina School District. Our full plan, we intend to publish by the end of the week. The groups are working diligently. I want to make it clear that this decision is not based on our inability to be prepared, but rather an overabundance and caution to make sure that everyone feels as though they are prepared, and to make sure that all staff are in place and that they've had the opportunity to work through this work. While we have had great participation, we want to make sure all of our staff has had the opportunity to participate with their building level teams on how we're going to implement these protocols. And then also making sure that we prioritize students as we phase in our hybrid models, and all of that will be part of the plan we plan to put out by the end of the week. We know that people have been very worried about the model of reopening. A couple people have picked up on my nomenclature from our teachers and our public. I heard a parent and multiple teachers use the word pivot. I don't own that phrase. That was the governor's phrase. But we need to make sure that we are prepared for all potential outcomes based on what is going on at that particular time. And we want to make sure, as Dean mentioned multiple times, our first, foremost priority, as it always is, pre-COVID or post-COVID, is the safety, health, and well-being of our students and of our employees and staff. At this time, I am available, as well as each of our committee chairs are still online to answer questions from the board.
The board members, now's our time.
Okay, I do have a question. Thank you for that presentation. It was really enlightening. And I know that there's more to come by the end of the week, but can you describe, Dr. Shelton and the committee staff, what's not in there? So what can we expect for the upcoming full release? And is there a disaster recovery plan in place? And what I mean by that, as a lot of people I'm sure want to know, if in fact a person comes down with COVID, what's the process for mitigation? I heard testing, but does the turnaround testing, the results for the turnaround testing fit with your return or hybrid model?
You want to take that, Dean? You want me to start and you fill in? Oh, I might have to unmute you.
Yep.
Team,
Okay.
don't just be quiet. Don't mute yourselves.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. So I'll take the piece, Dr. Shelton, around the testing. So the guidance that we've gotten around the statewide testing has been that we need 7 to 10 days prior to our staff returning in order to implement the testing fully. So the statewide model would be all of our employees will receive a personalized URL. I'm sorry, that's my dog squeaking her toy. Will receive a personalized URL. They'll take that URL, log in to the medical vendor. They'll go through a history of, have you been exposed to anyone with COVID lately, those types of questions. A test kit will be shipped to them within 1 and 2 days of completing that questionnaire. And then they'll log back in when they get the test kit, and they will go through with a one-on-one medical professional how to take the testing swab and how to do the testing kit, sealing it back into the vial and putting it in the self-addressed stamped envelope and sending it back to the company. And results, they promise results in 24 to 48 hours. And then it would be up to us as a district to work with CEA on how those results are reported. All positive cases would go directly to Delaware Public Health, and they would pick up with that. So that would be part of kind of that disaster plan. When there is a positive test, it would go through DPH. And we also have specific protocols in place for when there is a positive or potential positive. Let me say that, because we have to treat every illness as a potential positive. So we do have protocols in place for when there is a potential positive and what our steps are in terms of notifying the school nurse, notifying facilities so that we can begin to clean and disinfect, notifying HR, notifying our public information office, and all of those necessary steps, and also working closely with Delaware Public Health.
So I'll add to that, that every nurse's office will have a dedicated isolation room. So again, if we have anyone who we believe may be, we won't have certainty at that point, but may be, they will have a separate isolation room. There are individual HEPA filters that have been ordered and will be in place in each one of those isolation rooms, so that there'll be extra air filtration in those rooms. And obviously, our nurses will have additional PPE above and beyond what any of our other staff would have, because they will be potentially directly in contact. So all that is in place. As far as, I believe, one of your questions, just to go further on the testing, the state and the county have both offered services for what we would call hotspot testing, right? So if we were to have a case that we need then to do more significant testing, both the county and the state have offered those testing sites. For those of you who maybe have driven around, you may have seen some of the county testing sites that have kind of sprung up around. Actually, Kirk is one of the county testing sites. I believe it's every Thursday. Kirk runs a testing center. But they would come in to your point, if there was something going on and we needed like hotspots, they're willing to come in and help us with that, and open it even up to the community. If people wanted to come in, oh, I heard there might be a COVID positive in this school, I want to be tested, that would be then available. The last thing I would just mention that I think gets to your question is, as we move forward, any potential hybrid model, at least in the early stages, would be cohorted. In other words, we would be minimizing the contacts. So it is not our intention in any of our plans that we would, open Glasgow High School to all 1,000 students and they would be switching classes, right? In all of our cases, we would be doing small cohorts of kids and those cohorts would stay together. So if we were to have a positive, it would be very easy for us to identify the other potential contacts very quickly, isolate and or quarantine those groups quickly and easily without infecting a larger population. That is part of every one of our hybrid models, which again would not be starting September 8th, but would be rolling in phases as we ensure that all of our pieces are in place and that our staff and families are comfortable with the plan.
Thank you.
Did we answer the question?
Yeah, Dean, this is Fred Pulaski. I think you'd answer this. You talked about testing for teachers, and every teacher would need to have a test and come back negative. And I don't mean this as a derogatory remark about our teachers, but are we going to make sure that teachers understand a protocol that says once you're tested, you need to really keep yourself out of situations where you could contract the COVID virus? I mean, we've seen that throughout the country too many times where people get tested negative, and the next thing you know, Saturday night they're at a big party with 200 people dancing face to face, and half of them come down with. So even though you tested negative, excuse me, I said it wrong. You tested negative, then you put yourself in a situation that 3 days later you're positive, and to make sure people really understand expectations.
Yeah, Mr. Pulaski, sorry.
I think it's a really good point, Mr. Blasky, and I would hope with all of the concerns that have been brought out through DSEA and through our own CEA throughout the state, that our teachers would be some of our best mask wearers, some of our most self-quarantined of all individuals, as they are very loud voices in the need to do that and the need for safety. So it would be my expectation that they would be the models for the rest of our citizens for how to protect themselves and others by following the protocols. Dean, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Dr. Shelton. I completely agree. And that goes back to our third pillar is educating our stakeholders. Getting back to school is one thing, but that continuous ongoing education is another about how to stay safe. We know that that's a piece that has to continue and be threaded throughout our daily lives, with reminding them of all the practices that are necessary to stay safe during this time.
Dr. Shelton, I believe you touched on this. It's hard for me to keep track of where I hear different things, but a concern that I have, and I think numerous people have, is kids coming back, teachers coming back. We already see depression and anxiety levels and all of that rising because of what we're dealing with, and they're not coming back to a normal touchy-feely, hug and have fun type situation. So are there plans to what was I thinking, screen? I mean, not just our teachers, but students and stuff coming through to assess where they are on a social emotional level.
So I just first like to begin with Nick. I really enjoyed your interpretation of that question. So, Nick is our ASL interpreter at the moment. That's just to answer the question. Social emotional learning is health and wellness. Health and wellness has been tasked with a pretty heavy lift on the early stages of return, and the teaching and equity, the has been tasked with the heavy lift of making sure when they return, they're going to get what they need. And then our operations has really been tasked with making sure all those pieces are going to all fit together and work. We can't create a plan for, you know, remote learning if our kids don't have technology and the ability to get the learning materials. And we don't want to have anybody returning to the building unless they're healthy. So all these teams really are working together and in unison. But in answer to your question, the health and the mental health and well-being of our students is critically important right now. And let's be really, really straight about this. So we're not just dealing with a pandemic, we're also dealing with some pretty significant social issues that our students are dealing with on a regular basis. So we have a lot to tackle as we return. And I apologize if that's something I've said in this group, but I have these conversations in a lot of different public meetings. And it's worth repeating even if I have. Not only do we have students facing trauma through the pandemic, through potential issues they've had with family, due to potential issues with their parents' working situation or home situation, or they are home all the time and they're not used to that, and that's traumatic for them. And then we also, on top of that, have some real social unrest in our country that we're going to have to tackle, in particular with our middle school and our high school students who have a true understanding of that and a need to be heard. So absolutely, that is being considered, addressed, and one of the things that we will be tackling during that extra week of professional development and during the time that we're in remote to make sure that our students are going to be safe and secure in their homes, but also be safe and secure when they return.
Dr. Shelton, thank you very much. This is Warren Howell. Thank you very much for the work that you and each of your committees did. I had an opportunity to sit in on your operations committee meetings from time to time, and they did an excellent job. So I appreciate what they did, appreciate the work that you put in, and the fact that you listened to the surveys, you listened to your committee, and you listened to the parents and the emails and messages that we got, and we've taken some steps in that direction. So thank you very much for that. I do have a question, however. Have the committees identified, if we were to come back, a threshold that would make us say we have to stop and go back out?
So I'll answer that not very clearly, because this is one of those areas that we don't have clear guidance. So there's an anticipation that the governor will make positions throughout the next few months if we are to have specific hotspots. So for example, early on in the pandemic, if you recall, he closed the beaches. He then opened them back up. He then closed them again. He then opened them back up. Those were all governor's decisions. We would absolutely be following any governor decisions on those things. But the governor has also said that each community may have specific things to consider. So, and I'll just use this example because it was used with me. In the Woodbridge, Bridgeville community, they've only had one roughly a week case identified. So that's a community where they're feeling comfortable that they can return to school in a hybrid type model because they don't have cases in their community. In our community, we're very interconnected. We may have teachers in one district, their kids are in 2 or 3 different districts. They're have somebody living with them that's working in the hospital. We're just so interconnected up in our communities that it's going to be a little bit harder for us to dig into those community areas and really make those determinations. So we're going to be more reliant on what's going on in our buildings. However, I don't know that we've identified the number yet, but absolutely hotspots will make determinations on pivots if we were to move into some sort of a hybrid with some cohort of students, and then we see a spike in COVID positive, we would absolutely make a change to that based on the situation in our own buildings. I should also say, and I say this with a little bit of smile because it feels like a poopy joke, but the county has also said that they will be monitoring our sewers, that they have a way to actually track hotspots by monitoring our school sewers, so that they can actually, without even doing a specific test, they can identify there's COVID in the school through monitoring our sewers, believe it or not. And they're already actively participating in that and have said that they would help us with that at our school level. So I smile when I say it, but it's one more piece of the puzzle to help us make sure we're keeping everybody safe.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just a follow-on question, if no one else has a question right now, but are we looking, how are we looking to bring back our special needs students, our IEP families?
So there is a committee that is focused completely on students with special needs and our special populations, our preschoolers, our kindergartners, because we know it's going to look different there than it's going to look in later elementary, middle, and high school. If for no other reason than because we know in the older grades, the ability to follow rules and protocols and the protocols are more stringent in those ages. So we have a committee working on that diligently. They have a number of recommendations they're going to bring forward. I don't think we have all the answers to those yet, and quite frankly, that's one of those areas that we will have to make. That families have very, very strong opinions one way or the other. They're not usually in the middle. So that's one of those areas where we will, at some point in time, have to offer very high quality, both remote and sometime in the future in-person instruction in order to meet the needs of those individual families and their comfort level.
Thank you.
I had a kind of a quick comment related to some of that and a thought. I actually was thankful that the governor recommended hybrid, basically giving the districts a choice. I know there are a lot of people who feel it would have been nice to have that choice removed, and sometimes it is, but I feel that given that choice, we do then have the option to use our buildings for some of our special students that really do need that hands-on, or it gives teachers an opportunity who want to teach from their classroom the opportunity to do that. And I'm even imagining that certain classes like AP chemistry, where labs are important, maybe that becomes a priority. If the governor had said you have to go remote, those options would have been removed from us, and we would have been very limited in what we can offer. As a chemist, I know AP chemistry at home is not something I want my children doing. So I'm hoping that those are things, I'm on one of the groups, so those are things that have been discussed, but I kind of want to put that out there for people who were feeling a little angst about the governor's decision and passing the buck. I do think that gives us the freedoms to do what is best for our community and to make the changes necessary at the times they're needed.
We have a number of special programs and special populations that are going to have the need sooner rather than later to be provided with some in-person instruction. Career technical education would be one that's going to be critically important that we're able to get that in. We can't do driver's ed in full remote. So while our high school students may be able to be successful in quite a few of their courses in a remote option, and actually we found that some of those students can be even more successful because some of the social issues that preclude them from taking advantage of education are taken away from them in this situation. It's a negative, but sometimes it's a positive. There are some of those courses that are just going to have to be done some point in time in person because they cannot be done remotely. And then, as noted, special populations are special education students, especially those with significant disabilities who may not be able to participate fully in a Zoom meeting. How are we going to make sure that they're providing a high quality education is going to be critically important, and that is the focus of that group. I don't know, Dr. A, did you want to speak any further on that subcommittee? No. There you go.
I do have a question to that in regards to the term high quality. Before, and this is Alethea Smith speaking, Alethea Smith Tucker. I'll let my husband hear that. But before, when we had to do an emergency shift and with little opportunity for preparedness to go and to do distance learning, what would be different in the preparation now versus when we didn't have planning? What can parents and students expect in regards to receiving a high quality education now that there has been an opportunity to have some planning in place?
Sure. So we've had the opportunity now to build some systems and structures around how the remote learning will look. Adopting a learning management system. Back in the spring, we used several. Adopting a document management system so that we're all sort of operating from the same place. And that whether you have a child in a middle school, or high school, or elementary school, these structures will look the same. We've had the opportunity to really investigate and look at the kind of supports that are needed and the kind of outreach. And not just for our families and our students, but for our staff. Like really making sure that they are supported socially, emotionally, and that we're looking at the various needs of their family structures, and Dr. Shelton mentioned the childcare and other things. So we also are looking at alternative routes or programming for those that may not be successful in the virtual space. We realize that this time around, we are going to have to raise the level of accountability, but then also the level of supports will meet that as well.
Are there any other questions, comments about the plans?
When I know that it's being fleshed out, it's finished, like I've seen so many of the details. How is this going to be rolled out, shared? What's going to be available for people to see? Will there be a place for people, if they're unsure about something, to ask a question or leave a comment?
There's a comprehensive document that's in draft form currently. The plan is for that to be published by the end of the week, at least in its initial form. It then may have modifications and adaptations based on whatever happens. It will be put out on social media, on our website. It'll be pushed out through a link to it will be pushed out through our email system to make sure everybody's aware of where we are at the moment. And then as we do updates, we will continually update as we move forward. It is also my intention, we have a meeting on Friday, but it's my intention next week to do some sort of and Alva doesn't know this yet, but it's my intention to do some sort of a video message to accompany it, just to try and give that personal touch so that people can feel connected to the work.
One other thing that I would like to ask for or to bring up from an operational perspective is to provide parents and students for each grade level a syllabus in hand with sequencing. I think this will be immensely helpful in the event we do have to pivot, if you will, from home-based learning to back in school. And if there's any interruption in the interim, whatever that may look like going forward, if each parent and student from K, I know that they're doing it mostly in high school, but from K to 12th grade, receives a syllabus for each class, which I would imagine it already exists, but empower parents and students to know exactly from soup to nuts what's their learning objectives, the order in which their learning objectives occur, and so that if we do have to rely or pre-plan for supports to help support our children's education, parents will have an opportunity to then prepare for themselves. An example, if I have a kid that in springtime trigonometry is coming up or fractions, I can on the winter break, if you will, be a more and better prepared parent to help supplement and support that education. So I think that having the syllabus at kindergarten level through K through 12 will be immensely valuable to each and every parent and to students so that we can help work together and know exactly how we can work with auxiliary support, our tutors or whatever to help make amends or amend education. I was wondering how you felt about that.
No, thank you for surfacing that. I think that's a great idea, and I will take that back to our committee at our meeting on Thursday.
And if I can actually jump in, on our parent survey, there were actually 1,270 expanded comments. And I will say that the survey recommendation, which is something that actually is about to go to the Academics and Equity Committee, there were a number of suggestions from parents around that, having a high-level guide like they're used to seeing in colleges around surveys. So just wanted to provide that insight that we gleaned from our survey data.
I'm going to say I found this overview really helpful, and I know that a lot of time went in to creating these plans and these updates. So I just want to thank everyone who did it. I know that we had staff involved, we had district leadership, we had community members, we had board members. So thank you. There were a lot of the other board members have brought up the things that I would have questions for clarification on. And I know I'm looking forward to seeing the comprehensive plan later this week to get details. But I really appreciate having the overview and also getting that overview of that survey, the survey data. I know I participated in the survey, and a lot of us did, so it was nice seeing what everyone else in the community was thinking about reopening plans.
I know we need to move on with the meeting, Madam President, but just a quick question on attendance. Have we identified how we will keep attendance remotely?
So there are going to be a number of ways that we're going to determine attendance. For example, we have had discussions around, well, if a student is participating with the teacher live, but and doing the work, or maybe just doing the work and not participating live, can we count that as attendance? So we are creating space for attendance to look different in the virtual learning space so that we can make sure we're giving kids credit and accounting for every effort that is given. So attendance and what we consider attendance will be outlined in the document. Mr. Howe.
We do know that we will have, in the remote environment, we will have students that want to and are successful participating in synchronous learning, but we also need to make sure we provide opportunities for asynchronous learning. So those that are not able to meet in the morning for whatever reason in a remote environment will have the ability to participate later in the afternoon or the evening when they do have the ability.
That led me to another question, and I think the academics group is looking at this, but I recognize that there are going to be children out there who can learn what they need to learn in a day or a week much quicker than, especially if they're at home, than they might do so in a traditional classroom where they're in the classroom for 6-7 hours. I'm anticipating the expectation is not that each child has to spend 6 hours on their work if they can do it in 2. Does that seem reasonable, that there will be some sort of, sometimes it's the time, because for some kids, they'll spend some amount of time, and I still think 6 hours on computer stuff is a little bit much for children, but I'm not a teacher. But some kids may struggle in those 6 hours and not complete it, and other kids may finish it in 2 hours. I feel like the hours that we count kids in school seems a difficult thing to try to monitor.
It is, but we are going to have a structure of a schedule that says this is the suggested amount of time that we feel that we're going to spend on subjects and work, and then we will give kids obviously credit for what they have done. We're going to try to make sure that we have a handle and a pulse on those who not only need support, but are finishing quickly. We are creating space for small group instruction for not only our English language learners, our students with disabilities, but also advanced academics. So there should be some opportunities for some extra work if you wanted, or if you are getting work done in that time frame, be it early or not, we're going to give you credit for that.
I appreciate that. That's what I expected from you guys. Are great. Thank you.
So sorry, Madam President, for time. But one other, as I have question that I have, as I have spoken with a lot of parents within the community, from parent to parent, from different schools, from child to child, their remote experience has been different, even in the same school. So you could have, will there be any continuity or conformity required for teachers in the way that they deliver instruction? Maybe will all teachers, will all children have an opportunity to receive lessons via Zoom, if you will? Or if my child is in the second grade, will my child's teacher elect to only do video, and then my neighbor's child who's also in the second grade, their homeroom teacher does Zoom? Will there be any continuity in regards to the delivery of instruction so that everyone can have a equal experience and as best you can, given the various of skill sets and, creativity and so forth? Will there be at least some kind of uniformity or framework or expectation for education delivery?
Yes, there will be. Those are the systems and structures I was speaking of that we're going to implement and integrate this time around. And those reopening planning committee meetings I discussed with building leaders and program leaders, we meet as a grade band. So all high school principals are meeting and making the same plans. All middle school principals are meeting together, creating and making and agreeing upon the same plans, and the same with our elementary schools. So you will see some systems and structures that are Christina identifiable this time.
We've said from the beginning that we know that last time we were not prepared. No one has ever pretended that we were ready and we did it well and consistently. We did the best we could in 2-week blocks that we think we were going to go back to school 2 weeks later, and then we were told, but no, never mind, we're going to wait 4 more weeks. So it will be different. We have set the expectation that there will be accountability for teachers and students, which did not exist the last time, which is why you saw some teachers in some schools doing it slightly different than others. Now we're going to have structures in place to ensure that we have quality going on across the board with accountability associated with it. We have to, because if that's what we're saying we want, then that's what we have to be able to provide.
Thank you so much for all you guys, really intentional hard work. I can see the love and the passion and the consideration that's taking place, and I'm excited to see next week's plan so that we can all be ready for our students to get the education and the experience that they need.
Thank you, everyone.
Fred Pulaski, I just have hopefully one last question, longer term. So we're talking about starting virtually. Are we setting an expectation that the entire school, and I understand and recognize and agree, we'd like to get back into the classroom face-to-face, but are we starting from the viewpoint that teachers have an expectation that they may have to teach virtually for the entire school year? So we don't get partway through the school year and they say, oh, I thought I was going to be able to get back into the classroom in January and do this particular training then, or education then, because who knows when and if we're going to get a vaccine and how well that's going to work.
So there is an expectation that we are prepared for any scenario of 3 throughout the school year. And we will have to make modifications and adaptations as we move through. Simple, quick example would be, we didn't put an end date on the school year yet, right? We put a start date, we didn't put an end date, because we know we're gonna have to adjust as the year goes on. So that's a simple example of, we know we don't have all the answers yet, but to your point, we're gonna be prepared to deliver, whether it's remote, whether it's hybrid, whether someday we can bring everybody back. We're gonna make sure our plans are prepared for each of those things. I don't know if Dr. Akins wants to add to that.
Thank you.
That's good.
I'm so sorry, Keely. Just one other thing, and beg my pardon for for time's sake. There, and I do want to ask that the consideration for the public access Ed TV channel, which is, I know I'm going a whole different place, Dr. Dan, but the public access channel is something that is available to our state across the board. And just in a consideration as we look at how we support parents and children at home who may or may not, who may require more support to get their lessons done, I would like to consider leveraging that asset and even working across school districts, however, to produce high quality video or content that helps our children succeed. Math, fourth grade math is math across the board, right? And so in regards to children that may have challenges with the digital divide, may have challenges with sitting at a computer, there is this asset that's available to us that I'd like for you guys to consider as a way of deploying educational services and support. It's there for our usage.
As an idea to bring forward, and I think that's something absolutely, really right now, that's been one of my big focuses as we move forward. The committees have been working through all the nitty gritty details. I've been kind of staying at the higher level. I had personally had 3 different meetings this week with groups where I'm trying to galvanize people to help us support exactly what you're talking about. So, and I know at least 2 other meetings that took place with other people. So that is absolutely an area of focus for us. We know that this divide exists, and we know that it's not all socioeconomic based, right? Some of it just a divide. I could be really, really, really well off, but I'm doing HVAC or I'm doing tree work, and guess what? I'm not in my house for the next couple of months, right? So there's going to be my kids aren't going to have access to me to help. So we're going to need other people to help us with that. That's been one of my independent focuses the last couple of weeks, to try to galvanize people that can help us with that work. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you everyone, and thank you everybody for your feedback. Moving on with our agenda for this evening. Next item up I have is changes to the consent agenda. Are there any?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Moriak.
Wait a minute. I wrote it down.
So the way you'll word it is if there's an item.
All right. I would like to never mind, because they covered it in the
Okay.
they covered it. It was covered in the presentation. So I had a question, but it was answered.
Great. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We'll have a motion regarding the consent agenda.
This is Claire O'Neill. I move that we approve the consent agenda.
This is Warren Howell, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll for a vote, starting with Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, 1 vacancy. The motion passes. Next action item is election of representative to the Delaware School Boards Association Board of Directors and alternates. I can talk about this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Fred Pulaski. I'll volunteer for either Board of Directors, or I'll couple this with the second one, which is legislative committees. Just sort of what we've done in the past. Don't need to continue this, but since those 2 groups meet separately, what we've done is that our representative on the Board of Directors is the alternate for the legislative committee, and vice versa, just to have more continuous representation if somebody can't attend. Like for the last year, even when we were virtual, Keely and I backed each other up. So if she couldn't be at the director's meeting, I was, and if I couldn't be at the legislative meeting, she was, and it worked pretty well that way. It has in the past too. So I'll just throw that out.
Yep, and just to give some history, I really enjoyed being involved with Delaware School Board Association. I previously, for 2 years, have been our rep for board of directors. I will not continue that this year to give myself more time to focus on some being with the board now in this role. So we are looking for someone to take either one, and Fred's correct. Usually somebody takes one and they become the other one's alternate. This group meets 6 times per year, every other month for each of these committees. Typically pre-COVID, these meetings were in Dover. They were on Wednesday evenings. I found it to be a really valuable experience for me to connect with board members from across the state. And there was even a superintendent that was at the table with us. So it was a very positive group. I do think it's a good opportunity for someone. I know Mr. Pulaski has expressed that he'd be interested in continuing in his role. So I'm going to call for names, I guess.
We need to make a motion for Fred for the first one though, right? For number one, or item number 1. So I make a motion that Fred Pulaski be elected as the representative to the DSBA Board of Directors.
This is Claire O'Neill, I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Mr. Pulaski is the board representative, the DSBA Board of Directors. And we need an alternate as well. All right, we'll do this one first. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll start with Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak.
Dr. Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay, Keely Powell also votes yes, so this motion carries 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. We will also need an alternate for board of directors. Historically, the last couple of years, the person who's the legislative committee person is the alternate for board of directors. And I'll point out for all of these that any board member is allowed to attend these meetings, but we have to designate someone as representative for each. Mr. Pulaski has previously been the legislative committee representative for 2 years.
I can try my hand at the legislative committee.
All right. Anyone else? Any other nominations for legislative committee? I'm hearing Mrs. Moriak right now. Okay. So hearing none, we need a motion.
Fred Pulaski make a motion. Monica Moriak is our representative on the legislative committee.
This is Claire O'Neill, I second.
It's been moved and seconded that Monica Moriak serve as our representative to the DSBA Legislative Committee. Is there any discussion? No. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead with the vote. Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Ms. Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay, Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
All right, Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. As far as the alternates are concerned, we did discuss that previously each person was the other person's alternate. So do we have anyone, Mrs. Moriak or Mr. Pulaski, do you want to make a motion about someone being an alternate? Or someone else can be the alternate? Anybody can be the alternate. Do I have a motion?
If not hearing anything, I'll make a motion that Monica be the alternate for board of directors and I'll be the alternate for the legislative committee.
Do I have a second?
This is Warren Howell, I second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded that Mr. Pulaski is the alternate for the legislative committee for Delaware School Boards Association. Mrs. Moriak is the alternate for the DSBA Board of Directors. Is there any discussion on this? All right, hearing none, we can go ahead with the roll call for the vote. Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up, we have the election of the representative for the East Side Community School. I'll share some background on that position.
Yes, please. Yes, if you could give the background.
Yes, I don't have background on it actually. Mr. Pulaski, have any history on this one? I was not that person. Mr. Evans was that person. So I have not served as this one before.
No, I apologize, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. We need one.
I think George was in that position since I've been on the board, except for the 2 years he wasn't, and I don't know who filled his position then, so that position, so.
I motion to table it until we find out more.
That's appropriate, thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I will come back with more information. I did not realize we wouldn't have background.
Okay.
This is Claire O'Neill. I second the motion to table.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we table the election of the representative for the Eastside Community School. Any discussion? All right, call the vote. Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Right, Keely Powell also votes yes. That's 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next, we have election of representative for the Early Childhood Council Board.
This is Claire O'Neill. I nominate Warren Howell for early childhood.
Do I have a second?
Alethea Smith Tucker, I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that Warren Howell serves as the representative for the Early Childhood Council Board. Is there any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, we can go ahead and call the vote. Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Ms. Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Right, Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up is the election of the representative for the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee, or CBOC.
This is Claire O'Neill. I nominate Monica Moriak to be the representative for the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Warren Howell, I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Monica Moriak serves as a representative for the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote. Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up, we have the election of the representative for the Naming of School Facilities Committee.
This is Warren Howell. I nominate Ms. Smith Tucker for that position.
Do I nomination of Mrs. Smith Tucker position?
This is Claire O'Neill, second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that Mrs. Smith Tucker serves as a representative for the Naming of School Facilities Committee. Is there any discussion?
Just, so she understands, this is a committee that only is formed when there's a request to change the name of a school or part of the school facility. So that you may not have anything to do for the next year. I can't guarantee it. So, over the last several years, there was a proposal to change the name of West Park Elementary to, I think it was to Ken Burns, and that didn't happen. Pardon? It
was.
But then there was one to name the football field at Newark High School for Butch Simpson, and that was approved. So those are the only two that have occurred over a number of years. And you don't have to run the committee. Somebody from the administration actually runs the committee, but this is the board member on it. So
I think I'm up to the task.
okay.
Is there any further discussion on this?
Thank you, Fred.
All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll for the vote. Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
All right, Keely Powell also votes yes. This motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next item we have is the vacant board seat for nominating District G. Background on this, last week in our public meeting, we interviewed three candidates for the District G seat. This was a vacancy that was caused by a board member's resignation. This person, with the board's approval, would be in the seat until the next election, which is in May of 2021. There were three candidates interviewed in public session, and they were in no particular order: Ms. Susan Mitchell, Mr. Donald Patton, and Mr. Brandon Townsend. So the board members were present for that. What we would have to do this evening is take a vote on which is each board member's top candidate for that seat. In order for the person to be seated, they would need to have a quorum of the board, 4 people, vote for them this evening. So with that background, is there any discussion about this before I call for the vote?
So we're each just giving our top. Is that how this working?
Say a person's name when we call the vote.
I want to make sure I understood.
Yep. You can.
So,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You should just say a person's name when we call the vote.
You can say a name. Okay.
This is Claire O'Neill. I'd just like to thank the 3 candidates for stepping forward. It was a great interview last week. Great to meet everybody and hear ideas. I was really invigorated by our conversation.
Yeah, I want to say we've been through this process several times in the last year due to changes, and I'm continued to be impressed by the people who are stepping forward to be a service to this board. This time we had 3 people who all had a strong background in education in the K through 12, which was really nice. And I really appreciate them taking the time. I was impressed by their credentials and their interviews. Any other comments?
I second that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so given that, what I'm going to do for each board member is I'm going to say your name, and you can say the name of the person that you are choosing. And again, it has to be a quorum of the board going for it. I am going to start with Mr. Pulaski.
Brett Pulaski, I vote for Susan Mitchell.
Okay. Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, I vote for Donald Patton.
Okay. Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, my choice is Susan Mitchell.
Okay. Mrs. Smith Tucker. Mrs. Smith Tucker, who is your choice?
Yes. Like you said, there were wonderful candidates and impressive resumes. Susan.
That's Mrs. Mitchell. Okay. Susan Mitchell. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, I vote for Susan Mitchell.
Okay, Keely Powell is also voting for Susan Mitchell. Susan Mitchell has 5 votes. So Susan Mitchell is the person who is appointed to fill this seat until the next election. Thank you, everyone. And
She'll be sworn in at our September meeting, right?
That's correct. Our next general business meeting is Tuesday, September 8th. So we want to congratulate Ms. Susan Mitchell, and she will be sworn in on Tuesday, September 8th. And I thank everyone for participating in the process. Thank you. Next up, this item is Citizens Budget Oversight Committee members.
Let me get to this.
Okay.
This is Fred Pulaski. I'd like to make a motion that the board approve Dr. James Berry as a member of the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee.
This is Claire O'Neill, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Dr. James, what's his last name?
Berry.
Berry as a member of the Citizens Budget Oversight Committee. Is there any discussion?
I want to say I'm excited for him to join. The little bit I've interacted and followed up. But I also kind of want to point out to people that this is it's a public meeting, right? So log in, come, bring your questions, hear how things go. It's important to understand the finances because it's not a simple thing, and that we have space for plenty more people. So come and check it out, and maybe you also would be willing to come and bring your questions, because that's what we need. We need people's eyes looking things over, asking questions, and just double checking things. That's the point of the committee, and it is for the community to come out and be on it. So
I do have a question for the does this gentleman have a background in finance or budgeting or?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, he has a degree in economics from MIT.
Works
He
for
is
me.
very highly qualified.
Works for me.
yeah, but I also want to point out that I do not have any degrees in economics, finance, accounting, or any of that other stuff. I have been on it for 10 years, and I have been told by some people that I have pretty good information. Like I asked some good questions. So don't feel that you have to have a degree in finance or accounting or bookkeeping or economics or even understand any of that to be on this committee, because sometimes those people who don't already have that understanding ask questions that are pertinent because they don't have that understanding, and it brings, that's a good side to bring. So I don't want anybody to say, oh, I can't go because I'm not part of it. Come, you don't have to have a fancy degree. Come and join.
The other thing is, Fred Pulaski, even if Monica is the board elected representative on the committee, any board members that want to attend can do that. And the plan is the postings in the future will notice that there could be 4 board members there, but they won't be making any board decisions. So it's not a problem if you come to join a meeting and there's 3 other board members there, you have to leave. So we could have everybody attend meetings, which are now being held virtually on Zoom anyway. So
they are incredibly informative and sometimes maddening. So when you figure out how the state and the federal government or what the rules are, but it is important to understand. It's very complicated in Delaware. There are lots of twists and turns. If you've ever pulled a necklace that you haven't worn for years out of your drawer and it's all knotted, that is school finance in the state of Delaware.
So Monica, can you help me understand more about the purview of the CBOC?
So we review the monthly finances. We look them over, ask questions. We get an idea of what is, are there changes at the state level? Are there concerns? So we bring questions when we see something that seems unusually large in a certain category, or a new category or something you don't understand. You're like, okay, well, so it's a way of saying, okay, so how is that money being spent? Why is it there? If things have changed, why have they changed? Because the state funding formula changed, or because the state law changed, or that type of thing. So it kind of covers any of that. I mean, I've been on it for 10 years and there's still things that surprise me, but you do get a better idea of how things are broken up, and that the importance of tuition tax and why it went up 9.5%, 9.5 cents, not percent, cents. The tuition tax is important. It's how we make sure that we educate some of our most vulnerable students. And so those costs need to be covered. And so that's why the board can set that tax rate. But understanding where that comes from and reviewing that. So we review the Christina, our main 3,300, the School for the Deaf, the DAP, and Reach. Yeah, and Reach. So we do look over all of those. You look through, Bob Silber was fantastic with the data that he gave us. Chuck has been great as well with information. So I would say every board member should be coming on some basis, because there's just a lot to learn to understand how this works.
So I did take an opportunity to look over the budget. And one of the things that I think will be awesome at this point in time with the transition, with our new leadership, and in addition to the receipt of the referendum, is that we take an opportunity to step back and kind of clean house. And I offered to make a suggestion that we do a forensic audit, just so that at a base level, in concerns of being transparent for our communities to establish trust, to also make sure that the new administration has a deeper understanding and is free and clear of any abnormalities or tribal customs going into a new system. So I know this is the kind of discussion that we have to have in this forum, and I would like to ask that of consideration for the CBOC and put that out there, that I think at a base level, this is a perfect time for a forensic audit.
Yeah, we need to, I know we need to vote on this, but maybe come to the next CBOC and bring that up, because CBOC can also do recommendations to the board, because it is a committee of the board, of things that they, we tried pushing a referendum earlier than the board did. So those type of things. So that's a great, come to the next CBOC meeting and bring that up. Maybe it goes on a future agenda item. So things to discuss.
And I want to make sure we get back to the matter at hand, which was our new CBOC committee member, which is the motion on the floor. Any other discussion about that, the new CBOC committee member, now that we have some background on CBOC? Okay, hearing none, we are going to go ahead and call the vote on this one. Can we start with Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith-Tucker?
Alethea Smith-Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Lori Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, 1 vacancy. Next up, administrative personnel recommendation.
This evening, the administration superintendent would like to recommend approval of the deputy assistant superintendent, chief financial officer. We had 2 rounds of interviews. We had a really good pool of candidates apply for the position. And this evening, we are recommending Dr. Deirdre Akins for the position of deputy assistant superintendent, chief academic officer.
This is Claire O'Neill. I move that we accept staff recommendation.
Fred Pulaski, I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept staff's recommendation for the position of assistant deputy superintendent. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll for the vote. Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith-Tucker?
Alethea Smith-Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up is the financial position report.
You can speak. Oh. They want us to go ahead and just start.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
So
Go
Chuck
ahead.
Longfellow, Dr. Chuck Longfellow will be presenting our financial position report, and he is in the room with us. But I think he might be on video somewhere.
No, I'm not on video.
Okay, there you go.
You can hear me, I hope. It's a good mic here. This financial position report is one of 3 state-mandated financial position reports throughout the year. This is called the August Financial Position Report, and the purpose of it is to test whether we are going to have enough money in our local and our discretionary state appropriations to cover our salary through October 15. So one thing we do is we will take a look at our unrestricted state and local fund balance as of October 15 projected. And that number is around $12.5 million. 1 month Christina School District projected local payroll is $4.7 million. Therefore, we will make that benchmark and no action plan is necessary. I recommend that the board approve the financial position report.
This is Claire O'Neill. I move that we accept staff's recommendation.
Fred Pulaski, I'll second.
And we will do a roll call vote. If there's any discussion first. Apologize. Oh, good. And I now have a cheat sheet. Any
This is something we get, what, 4 times a year? 3 times? 4?
Three times per year.
Okay.
August, February, and May.
Okay. It was some weird number.
All right, hearing no further discussion. Ms. Moriak,
Monica Moriak votes yes.
Mr. Howell,
Warren Howell, yes.
Mr. Pulaski,
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Dr. O'Neill,
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Ms. Smith Tucker,
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
so that's 5 yeses, 1 not voting, 1 vacancy, and motion passes. They do okay?
Yes. So next,
Claire, would you like to take over? Or would you like me to take over?
Next action item is the.
You've both been saved.
Oh, brilliant! Yay!
Okay. Financial position.
We did the financial position.
You did the
report,
vote?
And we voted. You were
It
in
was fine.
absentia.
Thank you very much. All right, on to the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2021.
All right, Mr. Goff, would you bring up the PowerPoint or the PDF of the PowerPoint presentation? I need somebody to share that screen. I don't have
It's
it.
coming. He's
Okay,
coming.
here
He's
we
got
go.
enough. Oh, great. There it goes. I thought we lost
All
it.
right.
Speak up.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is a brief presentation on our fiscal year 2021 preliminary budget. We do a preliminary budget in the summer, and then we come back in the early months of the new calendar year to do a final budget. And throughout the year, we can amend the preliminary or final budget as needed. So from time to time, I will come to the board with a recommendation to amend either the preliminary or the final budget. Our fiscal year goes from July 1st through June 30th. For the state fiscal year, the exception to that is a federal fiscal year. We also have federal funds which go from October 1st to September 30. But when we talk about our fiscal year, it's July through June. Next slide, please. The first thing I want to do is just do a quick recap of the prior fiscal year. There's a very important number on here that I want to point out to you. So this chart just shows state and local, not the federal, as our final budget and our actual and our percent actual to budgeted. We also, during fiscal year 2020, so these numbers are just our fiscal year 2020 funds. There are some funds that do carry forward through several fiscal years. We have some funds that last for 2 years, some 2.5, depending on what they are, some 18, 15 months. So we do also in this slide disclose what our previous fiscal year before 2020 state and local expenditures made during the year were, and the encumbrances of fiscal year 2020 funds that we carry forward into 2021. That last statement, unrestricted local funds ending balance for fiscal year 2020 and starting balance for fiscal year 2021, to me, that's one of the most important numbers that I will present to you each and every year. So that's our unrestricted local carryover, and that is $8.87 million. When you consider the overall size of our budget, that is really a thin margin to carry over. So I just want to thank again everybody who had a part in passing that referendum back on June 9th, because we would not be we would have a whole different picture at this presentation if we hadn't. So thank you again for that. Our carryover the previous year, fiscal year 2019, was 9.9 million. So you saw that got smaller. We expect that to be bigger in future years. Next slide, please. Major factors influencing this budget. We passed that referendum back on June 9th. We have change in several senior leadership positions. And when you have a change in your senior leadership, sometimes you'll have a change in direction, a change in priorities. So stay tuned for that. We had a couple reductions with our state budget. We no longer have safety and security funds coming, and our minor capital went down slightly. We base a lot of what we're doing in 2021 on our 2020 actuals. And those 2020 actuals were also influenced a lot by COVID, because we did have 3 months of, few months of remote at the end of that. We have an uncertain year due to COVID-19. So we're doing the best we can to start out with a preliminary budget that makes sense. Next slide, please. I'd also like to note CARES Act funding. So we do have a grant of $5.9 million in CARES Act. This is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or ESSER, that's coming to us to respond and prepare for COVID-19 issues. Just a note for everybody who's listening, ESSER is a 2020 appropriation, federal appropriation. So it doesn't appear here in the 2021 budget, but I just want to let you all know that if you watch the monthly reports as we give them to the board, we do report all of our federal appropriations, whether they're fiscal year 19, 20, 21, they're going to show up there. So if you want to keep an eye on how much ESSER we have and what we spent so far, that's the place to do it. The Citizens Budget Oversight Committee will also see that report, and I expect they'll have questions from time to time about our CARES Act money. We don't know what other grants are coming with CARES Act. We do have another opportunity to apply for another $333,000, and I'm sure we intend to apply for that money. Next slide, please. Here's a high-level overview of our projected revenue for fiscal year 2021 in the 33 Christina agency. I put a percentage of total on the side so that you can take a look at how much of our money comes in as state, local, and federal. So when you add the state and federal, we get about 55%. So 45% of our budget is funded with local dollars. Next slide, please. Most significant changes in revenue. So of course we do have the referendum. We are in a district where we do see increases every year in students, a net outflow of students to choice and charter. So those things, they do affect our budget. We also this year are we're working with rising special education needs. That's a trend that's been going on for quite some time. So we have to meet those needs according to the IEP, Individualized Education Plan. We also this year are combining our ILC budget unit with 33 Christina. This will not lead to any changes in services. It's just ILC is a virtual funding school. And so one of the things we've had to do is allocate ILC units and funding to buildings based on the students who are going to each building. But by having the unit count have ILC students count to their buildings, we eliminate that process. And so we believe that the funds will more closely follow the student using this method. Back to my slide. And of course, we lost the safety and security money and some minor cap. Next slide, please. Projected expenditures. We are budgeting conservatively based on fiscal year 2020 and the known changes we have for 2021. Again, we anticipate some changes in priority or direction based on our new senior leadership. We will determine what those changes are. And how big changes those will be. And of course, our planning process will influence our future budgets. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about our school budgets. So there's a component of our local budget where we give some money to schools for their supplies, materials, and so forth that they can have some control or discretion over. The chart at the bottom gives some history over how much has been allocated to the schools using this method over the last 4 years. Back in fiscal year 2017, we allocated 0.09 million based on a straight per pupil methodology. Over the last few years, we morphed into more of a weighted method based on poverty or low income and English learner status. And so last year, because we had to show some austerity leading into the referendum, we only budgeted $620,000 to the schools. This year, we want to bring that back up some, 1.18 million, some of it based on low income, some of it based on English learners. And those pools are about the same as what they were last year. And then to add another part for per pupil, bring that back up somewhat to where it had been in the past. Next slide, please. So looking toward the final budget, this budget that you have is modeled after last year's budget. Over the next 6 months, as we go into the final budget, we're going to make some changes. I think some improvements to make it so that if you don't have that degree in finance or accounting or economics or whatever, that you can understand what's going on. Yes, it is a complex system, but I think there's some things we can do to make it easier to understand. And so one concept that we have is possibly having an evergreen document that tells you what the different funds can be used for, the different grants and stuff that we receive, some kind of a chart of accounts so you can see what a certain appropriation number or account number means if you look it up in the state's online checkbook, which is available to everyone. And then a part that changes every 6 months based on the preliminary and final budget. We want to present more information for you on projected carryover into the next fiscal year, not just in our operating fund, but debt service, tuition, match tax, and construction funds and so forth. Because I do believe that number of what you carry over that's really the most important number we look at. And then our expenditure budgets, we will make sure that they are based on functions and programs and so forth, rather than just being a reporting tool. Yes, it's still be a reporting tool, but we want to realign them with the lines of effort that we have to ensure that our resources are going to support our kids and those who educate and those who support them. Next slide, please.
Go back one, Bob. You had already gone ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Christina School District does administer statewide special programs in addition to Agency 33, which is Christina School District. These programs are Delaware School for the Deaf and Delaware Autism Program. We also have 2 district-based special programs that are open to students in other districts. One of those is REACH and one is ILC. Next slide, please. So our students with special educational needs, regardless of if they're in a special school or if they're in one of the other Christina schools, they're supported by state funds, local funds, federal funds based on IEPs. And for many categories of these of students for their funding, we do have inter and intra-district tuition billing and inter-district choice billing process to support the students. So a lot of what happens with the special schools is we will bill other districts who send students to us. We also bill ourselves, and that's where tuition money comes in. Next slide, please. This is a high-level overview of Delaware School for the Deaf with state and local revenue projections, $13 million. Projected expenditures, $13.9 million. You will see a deficit there. That means we're either going to need more state money or more to bill more for the students that go here, or unless we have a carryover that covers that. So this is something that I know I have to look at over the next several months. Next slide, please. REACH high level, $11.6 million revenue. 11.1 expenditures projected. Next slide, please. Delaware Autism Program, $38.2 million projected revenue, $37.8 million projected expenditures. And that's it for the slideshow. The budget itself is posted on board docs for anyone to take a look at. It's posted public, so the public can see that. At this time, I request the approval of the board's approval of the fiscal year 2021 preliminary budget.
This is Claire O'Neill. I move that the board approve the fiscal year 2021 preliminary budget.
Fred Pulaski, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the fiscal year 21 budget. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I had a question about the CARES Act funding. It ended up a little higher than I originally had heard, which is nice. What do we know? What how much of that we get to keep? There was talk about sharing it with other schools, private, charter, what have you. Has any of that been finalized? And other than it needs to go to something COVID related, which is like 90% of our needs right now, are there any other particular strings attached?
Okay. Yes, some of that will have to go to private schools through a concept called equitable services. Right now, we don't know whether we're going to have to do it through the Title I method, which is based on the poverty in the private school, or the Title II method, which is based on enrollment. And so that is a dispute that's going on at the federal level right now. Secretary DeVos of the U.S. Department of Education put out a ruling that it must be done by enrollment. That had a 30-day comment period. I don't know whether that comment period is done yet or not. I know that many in the state of Delaware believe it should be done with the Title I poverty method, because federally, the CARES Act money was allocated to states based on Title I, and the states, through the CARES Act language, was required to distribute that money to districts based on the Title I methodology. So then why would we go and do equitable services based on the Title II methodology? Doesn't make sense, but we're waiting to see what happens there. Plus, there are some lawsuits. Several states have joined a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Education to get the interpretation to be Title I. And I believe the NAACP has also done a lawsuit against U.S. Ed to get it done by Title I. So based on the Title I, it's probably somewhere in the 3 to 5% range that we would have to provide as equitable services. If we have to do it by Title II, the last figure I heard for Christina was that 14% of that money would have to go to equitable services. The state has held back 20% of it for now as an escrow, awaiting the outcome of that situation.
How does this get distributed, or how do charter and choice play into this?
Choice, charters get their own allocation based on Title I, and charters, however the charter movement affects statewide Title I, that's the impact that it has. But it's not like we're going to have to send any of our allocation to choice or charter, and that's already been figured out. Our $5.9 million is our $5.9 million minus what we have to send out for equitable services.
In other words, if a student has choiced into us from the Brandywine School District, they were already in our Title I count, and they were already in our Title II count, and were already taken out of Brandywine.
Right. That makes sense. I just trying to see if there's any more specifics related to that. All right. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other question or discussion on the budget? Okay. Hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote. Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up is the bond anticipation note resolution.
Thank you. Bond anticipation note resolution is to authorize the issuance of a bond anticipation note in the amount of $10,080,500 at a rate of 2.12% per year, maturing on June 30th, 2021, to the state, representing the local share of the fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program allocation authorized in the June 9th referendum, and the state of Delaware fiscal year 2021 Bond and Capital Improvements Act. The projects included in this are the Christina Early Education Center mechanical and electrical renovation, Marshall Elementary School HVAC renovation, Leisure Elementary HVAC renovation, Christiana High School renovation, Newark High School renovation, and Downs Elementary School renovation. Normally, the bonds, or in the last couple of years, the bonds that the state has for our capital projects are sold on the bond market in the spring. We were told by the Treasurer's Office that that would be the case this year as well. So Delaware Code does enable us to issue a bond anticipation note in anticipation of those bonds, so that we can get our local share earlier, which we need in order to access our state share. The reason that this is important is because we need that lead time. We need to get the money sooner so that we can encumber purchase orders. We can do our bids for design work, permits, some of the legwork that's needed to be done, so that next summer we can actually execute these construction projects. So that's the reason for it. I recommend that the board adopt the resolution providing for the issuance of the bond anticipation note.
This is Claire O'Neill. I move that the board adopt the bond anticipation note resolution as presented by Dr. Longfellow.
Fred Pulaski, I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the bond anticipation note. Is there any discussion or questions on this?
Chuck, I have one question that I think I can find the answer, but maybe you know offhand. I mean, we go out for bonds at a variety of time based on passing capital referendum. Do you have an idea of any bonds that are approaching the end? Do we have any that might in a year or two offset some of this potentially? Do you have any idea to that?
I can look at that. I've seen our list of bonds. I know that when Bob Silver did his work for the referendum to estimate what the rates would be, he would have considered that, which bonds are dropping off. And that is something that in our budget, I do want to actually put our bonds in there so that everybody can see when they're dropping off. I know that sometimes in the tax warrant, we've put that information in there, but I want to make sure it's in our budget document. So you should see that in the final budget, a schedule of our bonds and when they're going to be paid off.
Awesome, thanks.
Any other discussion or questions regarding?
Yes, what is our actual amount for debt service presently?
Our amount for, you mean the amount that we pay per year?
Well, actually the amount that's owed based upon borrowing from bonds.
Oh, the amount that's owed, the principal amount, I don't have that right on, on tap. That's one of the things that will be included in the final budget document when I put the schedule of bonds in there for us.
Any other comments or questions about the bond anticipation note? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote. Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith-Tucker?
Malika Smith-Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Haley Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up, we have change of school hours for Bancroft, Bayard, and Stubbs.
And Dr. Akins will be presenting this.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. So what you have before you is an action item requesting that the Bayard and Bancroft School and Stubbs Early Education Center change their school hours from 8:30 to 3:30 for all to a staggered start for our middle school students, which would be 7:05 to 2:05, which would mirror our suburban schools, and I'll get into that in just a second. Then the Bayard and Bancroft elementary schools would be 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And then Stubbs Early Education Center would be 8:45 to 3:45. They share bus, well, this change is being requested for a number of reasons. They share buses. And so what we experienced this school year is that the buses were late consistently because they would do the Bayard Bancroft run and the Stubbs students had to automatically wait and were not picked up historically until between 3:45 and 4 o'clock. So the proposed schedule aligns with our suburban sister schools, and this alignment is very critical because the middle school staff and students from the Bayard and Bancroft school had to leave school early in order to participate in sports, professional development, and other district clubs and committees. So this change will actually remove that scheduling barrier and allow the staff and students to fully participate in the activities they desire. We conducted a survey of all the Bayard, Bancroft, and Stubbs staff, and it indicated a need to separate arrival and dismissal of the middle school students and the elementary school students. This will allow more space in the cafeteria for breakfast and the ability to serve the lines quickly in 2 shifts. It also allows us to separate the 2 student groups on the bus. Right now, grades 1 through 8 rode the same buses. And so this time, it assists our transportation staff with better monitoring and supervision on the bus. Lastly, just from an operations standpoint, our transportation partners could not supply an adequate number of buses. So again, due to the overlap, this change will now give the opportunity to create a transportation plan where sharing of buses will not create tardiness issues for any of the 3 schools. With that said, we held a calendar committee group with paraprofessionals. I had administrators, we had teachers from the 3 schools, we had our child nutrition services staff there, we had transportation, and we had a CEA representative, and then CEA also wrote a letter of support for this change.
Thank you very much for the background. Do I have a motion regarding this?
This is Claire O'Neill. I recommend that the board approve the district's request to change the school hours for the Bancroft School, the Bayard School, and Stubbs Early Education Center as presented by Dr. Akins.
Pulaski, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the change of school hours for Bancroft, Bayard, and Stubbs. Is there any discussion on the matter?
I have 2 questions. I know that everything that we're doing in the city of Wilmington involves MOUs and all of those type of things. How is that affected? Is that something we need to worry about, or is that all been taken care of? I mean, just curious.
Right, so the MOU did not indicate a start time for the 3 schools. It just said that the 3 schools would have an agreed upon structure and that any changes would be brought to a leadership team, which is the team I got together, the task force, to ask for the change.
Okay. My second concern really is the science at this point suggests that our teens, middle schoolers, should be sleeping later. So it feels like I understand the need for the split. I understand lining up with the sister schools because I don't want our Bayard and Bancroft students to miss out on things because of that. But I kind of feel like we should be working towards the sleep science. Then it does seem like maybe we'll get an opportunity to really do that because, we won't have bus transportation, at least for the first 6 weeks. So how was that figured in? I mean, that's a real concern of mine.
Yeah, Monica, we have definitely had the opportunity to read all the studies, and there were some really extensive work done on that last year. As a matter of fact, we had a really thick study we were looking at that time. And we certainly do understand the science around that and the recommendations around starting school later. We also know that that was that's going to be an action item that was bigger than this piece for Bayard, Bancroft, and Stubbs, and so we're happy to entertain that if that's what the board and Dr. Shelton or however you would like to direct us to look at that from a district standpoint. But for now, we did want to align them with the current operations so that we could just mitigate the barriers that were causing them to miss some time. So maybe not the solution yet, but we certainly can take that into consideration.
I understand. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I just have one question, Dr. Akins. The parents of the middle school students, did they express any concern with basically an hour and a half earlier dismissal? Was that any pressure on them?
Yeah, Mr. Howell, thank you. I should have mentioned that. Thank you for highlighting that for me. We have taken into consideration that there will be some families that have a middle school student and an elementary school student. So the Bayard and Bancroft schools have put into their CSI plan some before school work like tutoring and I guess it would be not calling it childcare, but calling it extra instructional time so that if the two students really need to come to school together, which some families do have, we can accommodate them if they arrive to school early. So we have some before school tutoring and other activities taking place in case those families have to come together.
Is that the same at the end of the school day also?
So yes, we have after school programming at the end of the day as well. So those middle school students will have the opportunity to participate with Delaware Futures and some other groups that are coming in after school.
It's probably an appropriate time to announce that we should have actually done this as part of a superintendent's report, potentially, that Christina School District had partnered with the United Way and applied for 3 21st Century Learning grants, which are very comprehensive extra time programs. And we had all 3 of those grants awarded preliminarily. We expect them to be able to be in place this year. They are very large, very comprehensive grants to provide extra time learning. It just so happens prior to Christina getting these 3, the largest number of 21st century grants happened to be in the Capital School District. So I'm very familiar with the programs and very, very excited that they will be coming to Christina. It is an amazing opportunity for our students.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Dr. Shelton. Yes, so with the 21st Century Grant and some CSI funding, they're planning for kids before and after school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's Fred Pulaski. I understand why you need to make the change, and it sounds like it's being driven by bus schedules, and we've had problems for a number of years getting enough bus drivers and buses, and even compounded now potentially by COVID-19. But for several years, and this is more for Dr. Shelton's information, the board has asked the administration for several years to look at the science and look at what it would take for Christina to get the high school and middle school students starting school somewhat not at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's, nothing's ever happened on it up till now. So I think that's probably something we need to look at from a big picture strategic plan viewpoint, because it's a very, very complicated change to make. It affects not only the students and the schools, but it's society in general and the community and parents and daycares and everything else you can think about. But
and if we were to do it alone, it makes it much more difficult than if all of Newcastle County were to adopt something similar. I would definitely agree with you. This should be a question that is raised during the strategic planning process. I believe I've said it publicly in this group. If I haven't, I'll say it again. Reopening has definitely taken the time away from administrators to be focused on our potential futures. Dr. Longfellow mentioned his budget, that we will have potential some priority shifts that come out of that strategic planning. But I would agree with you, Mr. Pulaski, that strategic planning process where that work would need to take place and any subgroups that come out of that. But I would also agree it's not something that we would be able to necessarily tackle independently without other Newcastle County school districts participating. We would run into huge logistical problems that would put our students at a significant disadvantage. The logistics part, the sleep would be the least of their worries if the logistics are all torn up because we're the only ones doing it. No one else in Newcastle County is.
I agree fully. It was just information for new members of the administration, and Dr. Akins, I was in the district when it went on, but I'm not, how much she was involved with it. But just historically, the board has been asking for that for several years, and nothing's happened on it yet. So, and I understand it's not, to say it's not easy is an overstatement of how difficult it will be to make the change. So,
thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay. Hearing no other discussion on the change of school hours for Byron, Bancroft, and Stubbs, I will go ahead and call the roll for the vote. We'll start with Mrs. Moriak.
Mrs. Moriak, Monica Moriak, no. I really am worried about the sleep.
Okay. Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Yes.
Okay, make sure you say your name before your vote, just so we have it for the record.
Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Brett Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
And Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 5 yes, 1 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up is the elementary ELA curriculum selection process.
So Dr. Akins will also be presenting this. One of the things that I had spoken about as we begin our partnership now as a brand new board with a brand new, majority brand new board with a majority brand new senior level administration is that we would bring forward processes and have the board comment on processes so that when we had big projects that had to be done, the board would have their input on the front end, and therefore we would have better outcomes on the back end, as we would make sure the process that we followed had board input from the beginning. So this evening, one of the things that we promised as part of our referendum was a new ELA curriculum for elementary, and this evening, Dr. Akins will be presenting that process for the board's comment as we prepare to move forward with that. Oh, sorry. You're not allowed to unmute yourself after I mute you if you're presenting again. There we go.
Okay, got it now. Okay. So in preparation to adopt an ELA curriculum for our elementary schools, I want to propose the following process. So we want to reconvene the ELA adoption committee that we had for the past 2 years. We're going to invite our content chairs, which includes CEA members, and we're going to solicit input from any new members who express an interest in the work. And we'd like to, that timeline is going to be between now and mid-August. We're going to poll the committee for suggested curricula for consideration, get those suggestions by the end of August. And I should mention that I will be doing this work in tandem with Janine Bennett, who is our ELA curriculum specialist for elementary schools. We're going to re-examine the curriculum that we looked at previously and then identify any others for consideration. We're going to hold our first planning meeting by the end of August to outline the committee activities, identify their roles and responsibilities for those who are participating. Then we're going to hold a vendor day by mid-September. At this time now, we have the leading curricula in mind. We're going to hold a vendor day and invite the ELA lead teachers, our district ELA content chair members, reading specialists, and administrators. I will share later how we will get parents involved as well. This will be mid-September, and this vendor day is going to not only have an emphasis on showing us, their wares and what they have to offer, but to what extent their product will meet hybrid and virtual learning. So then after the vendor day, we're going to identify any pilot lessons or materials for any new participating vendors for the process. We had an opportunity to pilot some materials last year and the year before that. So for any vendor products we haven't already examined, we'll hold an additional pilot session. Any vendor we piloted already who might have some new material we will investigate that for a pilot as well. So in October 2020, we'd like to get some pilot lessons together and materials in teachers' hands and give them about 2 weeks to try 2 days worth of lessons, which will be provided by the vendor. We will then open the window for the lesson pilot, and teachers obviously will then get their materials and do just that. Then we'll reconvene the committee after the pilot to share input from buildings. We will provide all of the content shares from each building with a process for collecting input from building leaders, teachers, paraprofessionals, and parents in the building. We also will hold, and if I could add here, hold virtual or face-to-face, however we're allowed to do it, parent town hall meetings where we did in the past by showing them the different curriculums, letting them experience the lessons. We actually taught lessons to them in that space and we allowed them to ask questions. I'm prepared to do that virtually or visit the neighborhood house. I visited the other community centers in the area, or we've also had those held at the school if we're allowed to. So once all have had an opportunity to give input on the process we identify, which was a little feedback form, we'll put those all together and we reconvene to the committee to share and organize all the input. Then this committee will present the findings to district leadership. We will present a proposal for the ELA adoption to the board for approval, begin ordering materials, and prepare training and long-range professional learning plans. And we will also contact the CEA president and engage them so that they can partner with us in the planning and preparation for the year-long work. We're going to use this year as a planning and training year. Initial training beginning January 2021. We'll assess and adjust the plan accordingly and planning for a full launch for the 2021-22 school year.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, thank you for that explanation.
I think we need a motion. It's Fred Pulaski. I move we accept the administration's recommendation for the process for elementary English language arts.
This is Claire O'Neill. I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the administration's recommendation for the process for identifying an elementary ELA curriculum for adoption. I need discussion on this matter.
Yes, this is Alethea Smith Tucker. I wanted to know how in the selection process, I know what I didn't hear was how the curriculum would be evaluated against the actual Common Core.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we use the tool that we've got from the Delaware Department of Education, and it is a curriculum evaluation tool. It is very extensive. It is at least 4 or 5 pages. It carries a lot of weight in terms of looking at the materials, to what extent they meet the needs of English language learners, students with disabilities, advanced students, the intervention component, teacher ease of use, technology integration. There are several pieces on that tool. So I can get you a copy of the tool if you guys would like to see that.
That would be great. And what grade is this for? Like what age range for this ELA?
This would be grades K to 5.
K to 5.
Any other questions?
Dr. Egan's a couple questions. Will you be developing criteria and a process for evaluating the different vendors, or will you use the same process and criteria that was used previously when we went through this process?
Mr. Pulaski, we're going to create a rubric, and depending on who the curriculum, depending on what the curricula look like now, they do change each year. We will change the tool to meet the needs of the curriculum. I don't think we'll use the same exact tool as last year. For example, a lot of the developers have added a lot of remote and virtual learning, and so we're going to really have to add those technology pieces to our new form. So I anticipate we're going to change the form a little bit.
And I expect it would change. I was very impressed with the process that was used last time. That did an initial wants and musts, and then it weighted different criteria, and you did it was a very, very extensive voting. So the other thing is that you're going to reconvene the committee. And there've actually been, over the years, 2 committees formed. One that actually came to the board with a proposal probably about 3 years ago that the board rejected, and then you went again. But I understand that the number of people that participated the second time was a lot less. And I had some feedback from some teachers that said, I put a whole lot of time into this and they weren't happy that the board voted down their work. But I would hope we're going to be able to get back to the number of people and teachers that participated the first time, not the second time. And we can hopefully get people back involved that didn't participate the second time after the board said, no, thanks for all the hard work you did. We're not going to agree to it. So.
No, right.
That's more comment than questions, I think. But yeah.
I do have a question for Dr. Akins. Dr. Akins, also, would you be considering getting a survey from the students themselves?
At the K-5 level, or 3 to 5, or?
I mean, of course, geared toward them. And it may be that if you are evaluating the second grade, maybe the second graders can evaluate or do a test pilot on first grade. Yeah. Then, it can be simple for them. Do they like it? What was different, but framed so that the young people can actually have a voice. And the feedback, that's a area of feedback maybe teachers may not necessarily normally receive. How well did the child receive the education or receive the instruction?
So we did previously ask the students what they liked about the lessons. I wonder if I could create something with happy faces, like a happy face, a little straight line, and then maybe I don't like to use the word sad face, but maybe some kind of way, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways, where they could give their feedback. But along with interviewing them, we could do that. I will make sure that's included.
And I can send you some data on young children's surveys as well.
Thank you.
I guess one last question for me, either Dr. Akins or Dr. Shelton. You've got a schedule together. Will the board get some briefings on how you're doing on this process so we understand how things are going, if any changes need to be made to the plan, rather than we don't hear anything until here's the proposal and how much money you want to spend?
Sure, I can do that monthly. I can do that bi-monthly. I can keep you up to date all along the way. Absolutely.
Yes, keep it. I just think it's important, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that we're hearing now the process and get the input to that. But I think it's also important, and this comes from experience from professional work, to keep the board informed of what's going on. And you don't want to come back 6 months later and say, well, we changed the plan because things, and then we get caught cold at the end. So I think it helps very much and it may just be a report that's sent out. It doesn't necessarily need to be during a board meeting, but something we could get electronically to look at or whatever would help, and if there's things you need to discuss, we can do it at a board meeting. So.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the ELA curriculum selection process before we go to a vote? Okay, hearing no further discussion, we'll move forward. So we had the motion that was seconded to approve this process. I'll go ahead and call the roll for the vote. We'll start with Mr. Pulaski.
Pulaski, yes.
Okay, Mr. Howell. I think he stepped out. Thank you, Ben.
Warren Howell, yes.
Okay, Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Smith Tucker.
Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries. 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up, we have the resolution on virtual Board of Education meetings.
Fred Pulaski. We'll start out with, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the resolutions, which I will can provide background and go through and read, but I probably ought to have a second first, and then I can read through the whole thing. This is the same as topic as last month with revisions based on comments from last time. So.
This is Claire O'Neill, I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the Resolution on virtual Board of Education meetings.
So just some background. Get some new board members and so the public can understand. Currently, Delaware code requires that Board of Education meetings be held with all members in person, and that any participation by the public during public comment must be in person. The reason we're able to do this meeting on Zoom is the governor's emergency order back from March 12th allowed public meetings to be done virtually during the state of emergency. And the governor keeps extending that every 30 days. So as long as we're under that state of emergency, it is allowed that we continue to meet this way. There was a Senate bill that was introduced, Senate Bill 243, that was amended to Senate Supplement 1, that amends the code that during a emergency, then public meetings can be held virtually. But to do that, essentially, that just does the same thing that the governor's already done under his authority. It doesn't provide for virtual meetings outside of emergencies. And that legislation, and I haven't checked recently, at one time it was approved by the General Assembly, but Governor Carney hadn't signed it yet. If it is signed, it still sunsets on June 30th, 2021. And I think the reason for that was to put something in place as an interim for a year or so, as there's investigation done at the General Assembly level as to whether public meetings, which are now required to be held in person, could be done virtually. There are other organizations or boards within the state that are allowed to have members participate virtually, but that does not apply to Board of Education meetings. And in addition to COVID-19 pandemic, there have been meetings of Christina in the past where board members couldn't physically attend because they had to be out of town on business, but would have been able to participate virtually, but it was not allowed by Delaware code. So there's actually two resolutions, but I'll read the whole thing in its normal format. Resolutions. Whereas holding the Christina School District Board of Education meetings online by video conferencing has allowed greater participation by individuals who cannot attend in person. CSD board members have received emails requesting that Board of Education members continue virtually. And whereas when the COVID-19 pandemic will end is not known, and whereas a state of emergency may be terminated before all concerns with COVID-19 have been overcome, and whereas CSD Board of Education meetings can result in crowded conditions that do not allow the adequate social distancing, and whereas it is not known if there are meeting locations within the Christina School District to provide adequate ventilation airflow to prevent transmittal of the coronavirus, and whereas the health and safety of members of the Christina School District Board of Education and other personnel needed to hold an in-person meeting is of utmost importance, and whereas the health and safety of the members of the public and school district employees who attend the Christina Board of Education meetings is of utmost importance, and whereas virtual meetings have been an effective means of holding Board of Education meetings and have increased attendance, and whereas members of the Board of Education have been prevented from attending Board of Education meetings in the past when board members could not physically be present, and whereas the technology for holding online meetings has improved significantly since the current Delaware Code was approved. Resolution 1, therefore it is resolved that the Christina School District Board of Education requests Governor Carney to continue at least a limited state of emergency through June 30th, 2021, to allow school districts in the state of Delaware to hold Board of Education meetings virtually if the Board of Education so decides, in accordance with all other applicable Delaware code. And a second resolution, therefore it is resolved that the Christina School District Board of Education requests that the Delaware General Assembly change the Delaware code to allow participation in Board of Education meetings virtually by members of the public and by members of the Board of Education when the board member cannot physically be present for the meeting. Any members attending virtually would have the same rights and responsibilities when attending virtually as when they are physically present at a Board of Education meeting. Any member attending virtually shall be deemed in attendance for all purposes, including purposes of establishing a quorum. The Delaware Code would include provisions for each school district Board of Education to determine how to implement the provision of Delaware Code. And with that, I'll take questions or
think we need a
try to
motion.
explain it a little bit more.
We already got that. Okay, so are there any questions? I know this is second read. Oh, it's table? Okay. This is it. If no one has any discussion, we can go ahead and take the vote on adopting the resolution. And hearing none, I'll go ahead and call the roll. I will start with Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Ms. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Okay, Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries. 6 yes, 0 no's, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up.
Let me just, Dr. Powell, what I'll do with this then is, I guess, work with Dr. Shelton and our administration to get a letter drafted to Governor Carney with the results of this resolution, and on changing things in the General Assembly. I'll start the work through Delaware School Boards Association with Dr. Marinucci and other members of the General Assembly to see which ones are interested in working with us to get the legislation changed and work out the details of that, because there will be very specific details needed to be done. But as I said last, I wanted to get the board of support before I went off and did that and find out we, didn't want to do it on my own. So thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's support for this.
Okay, next up we have proposed new board policy 2.32, policy statement on Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, second read.
No changes have been made since the first reading, and it is before you today. Ms. Crumlish is also here to answer questions as well as I am, should you have it.
Okay, give a motion.
This is Claire O'Neill. I move that the board approve the proposed new board policy 02.32, a policy statement on Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972 as a second read.
Fred Pulaski, I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the new board policy 02.32, policy statement on Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972, second read. Any discussion? Okay.
Yes. Dr. Powell, can you please a little context and background to that, please?
I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Could you provide context and background to that?
Okay, so this is a policy that is required to be enforced, and we have not had this policy previously. So the district attorney was able to provide this and write this policy for multiple districts in the state. And so we are asking this policy be put in place so that we have a process if there are any complaints in the future.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any, is there any other discussion or questions regarding the policy? Okay, hearing none, I will do the roll call for the vote. We'll start with Mrs. Moriak.
Dr. Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
And Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. Next up, proposed new board policy 01.20, policy statement on board electronic and social media use as a first read.
So this evening, you have before you a draft policy or a first read policy for your comments and suggestions. And we are working to get Ms. Mobley back up to answer any potential questions. It is, this is a first read and open for board comment.
Any comment or discussion on this?
I think we need a motion first, don't we? I'll make a motion to accept new board policy 01.20 as a first read.
This is Claire O'Neill, second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept new board policy 01.20 Policy statement on board electronic and social media use as a first read. Now, is there any discussion?
This policy, without reading it, I'm thinking that it mirrors the acceptable use policy for the rest of the district.
So I'm bringing on Latasha Johnson, who will be able to answer some of your questions as we try to get Ms. Mosley back on as well.
Hi, this is Latasha Johnson. I believe that the acceptable use policy speaks more in regards to the district devices and using the district networks when you're using your devices. This social media policy is more geared towards social media usage and websites and blogs.
Is there already then an acceptable use policy for board members that we could tie in with this?
So so Latasha, you got to just be quiet. You can't mute yourself or you go locked out. But I'll just answer that while I'm trying to get you back in. So the acceptable use policy, you guys do sign, I believe, when you get your new devices, you sign as the acceptable use because you use district equipment and district network. These policies are unrelated. There is a student social media policy. This would be one that is more directed toward.
Is this something that is pretty common and we've just been missing?
We did see this across the board for different school districts.
Yes.
All right.
Any other discussion or questions regarding this proposed policy on first read?
This is Fred Pulaski. I mean, I read through it and I think it's a good thing to have. I don't have any problems with it. I was sort of, as I was reading, hoping I could find some more specific guidance on what's acceptable and what's not. It was like, the way I read it was, don't put things in writing that you shouldn't put in writing, but I don't know. So I understand it's very tough to do that because then you get into First Amendment rights of free speech and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. It just
It seems similar to something that businesses might have if you're representing the business.
Businesses that are somewhat in different situations than we are as a public body, and that businesses, I think, can, as conditions of employment, put stipulations on that if you violate it, it's grounds for termination. But
we didn't get because I don't know how to accept things.
Right. Any other discussion on this matter? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote on board policy 01.20 as a first read. Dr. O'Neill?
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski?
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell?
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak?
Monica Moriak, yes.
Smith Tucker?
Alethea Smith Tucker abstain.
Okay. Keely Powell votes yes, the motion carries. 5 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention, and 1 abstain. Next up is proposed revision to board policy 02.12, policy statement on establishing procedures, criteria, and priorities for considering choice applications, first read.
And this evening, again, Ms. Crumlish will be presenting this. This is a revision to a current policy, and this is a first read.
Fred Pulaski, I make a motion to accept changes to board policy 2.12 as a first read.
This is Claire O'Neill, a second.
Been moved and seconded that we accept the first read for the changes to board policy 2.12. Any discussion?
Fred Pulaski, as I read through it on the track change, it's just the addition of 4 words under G, transportation, if space is available. Is that correct? Is that the only change?
No.
Yes, that is the only change.
Okay.
Any further question or discussions on the proposed revision? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote. We'll start with Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Mrs. Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Mrs. Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Okay, Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. And we now have the proposed revision to Board Policy 04.11, Policy Statement on Employee-Student Communication through Social Networking or Electronic Media as a first read.
So this is the policy that I stated in answering Mr. Howell's question that currently exists. There are modifications to it, and I believe Ms. Mobley is available to answer questions, or Ms. Johnson.
Fred Pulaski, I'll make a motion that we accept the proposed revision to Board Policy 4.11 as a first read.
This is Claire O'Neill, second.
Moved and seconded that we accept the proposed revision of Board Policy 04.11 as a first read. Any discussion? Okay. Not hearing any discussion or questions on this revision as a first read. Okay. Hearing none, I will call the roll for the vote. Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, abstain.
Okay. Keely Powell votes yes. The motion carries 5 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention, and 1 vacancy. We did not have any items pulled from the consent agenda. Next up, I have board discussion and DSBA updates. Does Mr. Pulaski have an update?
Nothing's been going on with DSBA other than the annual summer meeting was canceled due to COVID-19 concerns.
Okay, that's the update. Next, board discussion. Some of that has occurred around some of our action items throughout the agenda this evening.
I wanted to take a moment just to say I'm excited that Dr. Akins will be the assistant superintendent. I'm so incredibly impressed with what she covers, what she does, her thought process. I am excited that I get to work with her, even if it's a small bit part. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
Congratulations, Dr. Akins. Any other board discussion? Next up, I have items submitted by the board. Are there any? Board member reports? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Claire O'Neill, so moved. Claire O'Neill, second.
All right, so seconded that we adjourn. Let me make sure I call the roll so we can do a vote on it. Mr. Pulaski.
Fred Pulaski, yes.
Mr. Howell.
Warren Howell, yes.
Moriak.
Monica Moriak, yes.
Smith Tucker.
Alethea Smith Tucker, yes.
Dr. O'Neill.
Claire O'Neill, yes.
Keely Powell also votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 vacancy. We are adjourned. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Good evening.
Everyone,
Thank you. Good night.
appreciate all the work. Great job.
Thank you, Bob and Dan and Keely.